Okay, looks like we got everybody back. Do I have a motion to return to open session?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Purcell and Dr. Roundtree, any discussion? Ms. Osborne, please call the roll.
Ms. Vaughn?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Dr. Guidry?
Yes.
Ms. Parton?
Yes.
Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion carries. Do I have a motion to certify closed session that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which the certification applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered?
So moved.
Second?
Dr. Roundtree and Ms. Franklin? Any discussion? Ms. Osborne, please call the roll.
Ms. Vaughn?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Dr. Guidry?
Yes.
Ms. Parton?
Yes.
Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion carries. All right, everybody, thank you. I do want to apologize for going a little bit extra long in our closed session this evening. We had a lot to discuss, particularly for our public address speakers. I know you signed up with the anticipation of speaking sooner than now, so I do apologize for that. But thankfully, we don't have anything else on the agenda. We're going to jump right into public address. I do want to take a moment to highlight our special guest star tonight up here with us, Mr. Brad King from Sands Anderson. He's our legal counsel who's joining us tonight. For some of us, it's our first time meeting him in person. For others, it's been a welcome reunion. So it's good to have you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. All right. With that, we're going to jump right into public address. Our next agenda item is a public address. We welcome the opportunity to hear from students, parents, employees, and community members about education matters in this community. As a reminder, the board sets aside 30 minutes to start our public address. We have the option to extend in 30-minute increments, which Ms. Osborne will remind us of. If there are additional speakers after 90 minutes, the board will continue with their business meeting and hold one additional 30-minute session at the end of the business meeting. The clock continues through applause and disruptions. The more disruptions there are, the fewer speakers who get to address the board. I will call each speaker up by name in the order that they signed up. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the board. The board does not respond to speakers during public address. The screens will show when the speaker has 30 seconds remaining and when time is up. Please state your name and the area of the county in which you live. And the first speaker up is Tess Larson, followed by Glenn Chilcote.
Good evening. My name's Tess Larson. I'm a senior at Blacksburg High School. While he couldn't be here today, I've just sent you all an email with Mike Wade's contact information, who works with the New River Valley Community Services doing Narcan trainings. I've also sent you resources that have been passed out to you. Last year, I tried to hold a training at my school in order to spread awareness about the dangers of opioids and how to treat an overdose with Narcan. For those who don't know, Narcan is a medication that reverses the effects of an opioid overdose. It can make the difference between life and death. I was told students were not allowed to carry Narcan on school grounds and that no trainings or even advertisings of trainings were on campus. The only justification I heard was that Narcan was in violation of the medication policy. I'm requesting that this policy on Narcan be re-examined. Like something as simple as eye drops, Narcan is easy to use and can be bought over the counter. It has absolutely no recreational or harmful effects and is perfectly safe to take in any circumstance, even when you're not experiencing an overdose. But opioids, and specifically fentanyl, are a public health crisis. Fentanyl has been identified as the leading cause of death for Americans between 18 to 45. And overdoses aren't just the result of addiction. Anyone, including students, can accidentally consume fatal amounts of opioids. This is why Narcan is so important. If students find someone who's overdosed, they don't have time to go get Narcan from the nurse. They must have immediate access to it. I know there are concerns that allowing access to Narcan will actually encourage drug use, but studies have found that if there's any change at all, it's that drug usage actually decreases with access to Narcan. Narcan is not a way for students to safely do drugs. It's as necessary as an EpiPen or a defibrillator. The current policy in Narcan reflects a stigmatizing and frankly outdated view of drug usage and addiction. Allowing Narcan will not only potentially save lives, but offer support to students who have loved ones in danger of overdosing. It supports the students who simply don't have time to worry about a school policy when their family members are at a constant risk of a fatal overdose. In 2023, over 60% of fatal overdoses had an opportunity for a life-saving intervention. Even Virginia House has just recently passed Bill 1473, which legally requires a flyer about fentanyl and Narcan to be distributed to students, which I know MCPS has just recently shared. Everything is telling us that it's time for Montgomery County to address the issue. I'm asking the school board to make 2 changes to the medication policy. First, that Narcan be allowed to be carried by students on school campuses, and second, that Narcan trainings be permitted on campus. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Larson. Next up is Glenn Chilcote, followed by Kimberly Williamson, I believe. Yes.
Chair Hudson and members of the board. My name is Glenn Chilcote and I live in Blacksburg. I've had the privilege to work for quite a few superintendents in my time here in Montgomery County. Tiffany Anderson, Brenda Blackburn, Walt Shannon, Mark Meyer, Annie Whitaker, and now Dr. Brigham. I'm well aware that you all will be voting on Dr. Brigham's contract this evening, and I'm here to show support for his continued service to Montgomery County. In my various roles throughout MCPS, I've had the privilege to work closely with him, and I think he's a trustworthy individual who always seems to put himself in others' shoes. His predecessors always seemed to be defensive when discussing employee concerns. Not Dr. Brigham. He listens and tries to find solutions that work for everyone. He trusts that everyone is working hard, and that trust goes a long way. Please don't think I'm here as a result of anyone's request. I'm here because I think it's important that we get to continue to work with him. And we don't always agree. There are several issues that we're still working through. We still don't have a fine arts administrator. We still don't have anyone in the school board office advocating for the fine arts. Music and PE, physical education and music. Music, the only subject that activates more areas of the brain simultaneously than any other subject we teach in Montgomery County, was cut by 25% pre-pandemic. Physical education was cut by 25%, and it is still not restored back. But being able to have these hard conversations with someone that you can respect and feel that that respect is mutual is important for any organization's success. I look forward to finishing my career in Montgomery County, and I hope Dr. Brigham is around for quite some time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chilcote. Next up is Kimberly Williamson.
Kimberly Williamson, Christiansburg. You know, Jesus still loves you. He has never stopped and will never stop loving you, his exquisite creation and family that he created for himself. He loves you so much that he wants to rescue you from every dark pit and sinking quicksand that you may find yourself in. This could be anxiety, depression, fear, false beliefs about yourself and who he made you to be, false beliefs about your status as victor and not victim, the bondage of drugs or alcohol, feeling trapped in an unhealthy relationship, the financial or mental slavery of poverty, and so many other things. Things that keep you unable to live your fullest and most abundant life that Jesus came to give. Why am I saying these things tonight? Our world is in a very precarious place right now. America and her future are in the balance. There are many forces that want to destroy this nation and keep Americans in bondage forever. I believe they are going to try and throw many things at us in the coming weeks before our national election day. And I pray that the worst of it does not come to the New River Valley. But if things seem crazy and out of control in coming days, and anxiety and even despair begin to skyrocket, whether in the youth of this school system or in the adults who administer it, I want everyone to know that it is not too late. It is not too late to turn to Jesus and find your place of stability and strength in him. You can still return to him with all your heart and allow him to love you and rescue you from all the plagues, from all that plagues you. He is merciful, kind, and caring for you, but he is a roaring lion against all who would attempt to harm you. Just like in the land of Egypt, God turned all the plagues against the rulers and systems that were holding Israel in slavery, but used them for the ultimate freedom and liberty of the Israelites. It is the same today. If you find yourself in a bad place in coming days, find a Bible, and I suggest maybe starting with Psalm 23, Psalm 91, or the book of John. John 3:16-17. God loved the people of this world so much that he gave his only Son, so that everyone who has faith in him will have eternal life and never really die. Life is a key word here, and eternal begins now. Again, God did not send his Son into the world to condemn its people. He sent him to save them.
Thank you, Ms. Williamson. And with that, that concludes a public address. Next up, we will move on to our consent items. If no one wishes to move an item out of consent, we will consider these items approved. Okay, great. Next up, do I have a motion to acknowledge receipt of the financial summary report for July 2024? Ms. Bond, Ms. Franklin, any discussion? Ms. Osborne, please call the roll.
Ms. Bond,
Yes.
Ms. Franklin,
Yes.
Dr. Guidry,
Yes.
Ms. Parton,
Yes.
Ms. Purcell,
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree,
Yes.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion carries. Do I have a motion to approve of the payment of the bills as presented?
So moved.
Ms. Bond and Ms. Franklin. Any discussion? Ms. Osborne, please call the roll.
Ms. Bond,
Yes.
Ms. Franklin,
Yes.
Dr. Guidry,
Yes.
Ms. Parton,
Yes.
Ms. Purcell,
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree,
Yes.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion carries. All right, with that, we will go into our business meeting. We prioritize the legislative policy revisions up first. And a big reason of why Mr. King is here tonight is for a chance for school board members to ask any questions surrounding those policy revisions. So legislative policy adjustments from the 2024 state legislative session were presented initially at the July 30 meeting. The revisions are presented for approval tonight. Any discussion? Whoever wants to start.
So these are provisions that have come down from our legislators, not from the district, correct?
Ms. Franklin, if that question was directed at me, I think the answer is yes. These are all revisions that we made as part of our policy update service to the board based on General Assembly action from this year.
I have a couple, well, I'll ask one question first. So with the literacy plan policy is a new policy. I know I've looked at the legislation and the act that was passed, and it does not require a school board to pass such a policy, as far as I can see, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. On the other hand, the school board did not ask for such a policy. Why do we have this new policy?
So I think the fairest way to answer that question is you are required to have a comprehensive plan.
Correct.
You are obligated to follow the standards of learning.
Correct.
The literacy plan is required as part of the comprehensive plan, as you've seen from the legislation.
Correct.
I think it has been our practice to offer to you when there are substantive areas such as this, just as a way to be transparent with your community about what you're doing, it would be a good idea to have a policy. As you know, and your literacy folks that work for you can explain much better than I, this has been a topic of pretty significant attention in terms of instructional delivery. And again, I think out of an effort to be transparent, we've offered it to you. I do agree with you that it is a literacy plan that has to be part of your comprehensive plan. And to the extent that you're adopting a comprehensive plan and reviewing it as required by law, that would probably satisfy the letter of the law. But our history of providing policy services to you all for the better part of 20 years, we have often offered policies like this when there is an issue that garners this kind of attention.
Okay, so I ask it for a couple of reasons, not just because I don't see it called for, but we don't have there are other areas of the curriculum for which we do not have an explicit policy. And for me, it's not clear the difference between policy and administration. So what you just said that we need are folded under current policy. So we have an instruction and textbook a policy. So we have other instructional policies. On the other hand, some of the other elements are matters of administration that we don't elevate to the level of policy explicitly for an area of the curriculum. So one of my
although I'm reluctant to come up with an example right now, I don't disagree with you. There are a number of places in federal and state law that says the school board shall have a policy and it shall include the following. There are others that there are modest suggestions that they be addressed by policy. And again, just given the level of attention that this issue has garnered, we thought it might be important for the board to consider a policy statement.
Okay, because one of my concerns is that we have
That you don't become so prescriptive in everything in policy.
Exactly, and also a possible conflict, so that, say, something could be implemented that contradicts another area of policy, but someone can say, well, we have a literacy plan policy and this adheres to that. And so one of my concerns is both elevating, but also over-prescribing. Because one of the concerns in this district has been about the autonomy of teachers, and I'm concerned by implementing more policies that dictate what the teacher is going to do in the classroom. We're not listening to the concerns of teachers about their autonomy. And it doesn't even say that the school board shall adopt a literacy policy. It says a plan, which we've already done. So that's why I'm asking that question, because I'm not in favor of.
And you're
of
correct
elevating.
that sometimes we address these things in regulation rather than as policy statements, which then you defer to your administration to develop those regulations, which don't require board approval, but are usually brought to you as informational items.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'll withhold my other questions until other people have had a chance.
You can go around. Ms. Barton?
So I'm going to say, for the reasons that Brad gave, as far as being transparent for one, and because of the speculation around this particular subject with literacy and instruction, that I am going to say that I will adopt the policy, and I am for the policy, and I think it would be a good idea for the board to enforce that policy. Things have changed so much in the past couple of years, and we have board members asking for new things and new policies all the time, due to those certain items. So with all due respect to that, I've read over it. I don't see anything in it, to me personally, here again, I'm not speaking for the board, that would distinguish anything between what we have as what we're using as the plan as adhered to what the policy says. So I would vote in favor of adopting the policy.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bone? Okay. Ms. Purcell?
I mean, to kind of echo what Ms. Parton just said, what we have outlined here aligns with the state regulation, which seems like an important place to be. It's not something we want to be violating. Although I do agree with Dr. Guitry with regard to not being so prescriptive in a policy that a trained professional can't adapt to student needs as they need to. That's a very wishy-washy little statement from me. But I guess that's more of a statement, less than a question, less of a question.
That's fine. Okay, thank you. Dr. Roundtree?
Yeah, for the majority of the policies, no comment. To Dr. Guitri's point, and making up a word, potentially over policyfication of items. Just restating the state's guidance in legislation in our policies for the sake of doing it may not be of benefit, but my decision's still at large right now.
Okay. Let me get a couple comments in here, and then we'll go around again. I guess for me on that one, in terms of the literacy policy basically just says, thou shalt have a literacy plan, right? Which we already have without having needed a policy to tell us to do it, right? So this just kind of says, hey, good job, you all should have done the thing that you already done. But, it's pretty vague in terms of what it says that policy needs to do. So I feel like it still gives us the latitude that we need to be responsive and to do the things that we're already doing and probably want to continue to do. So, so I didn't have many issues with that one. Mr. King, I did want to clarify though, because it's one of the notes y'all had in here was just it was a clarification of the FOIA definition of public meetings and members attending them. I didn't see a specific change to any of the policies around that, so I just took that to mean that was just a clarification of what was already there. But
Mr. Chairman, if you're referring to policy 1-6.1, you flip to the fourth page. In the paragraph numbered 1B at the top, you see that there's a clarification about when a board member may participate remotely because of being a caretaker.
okay,
And then down at the bottom, the statute includes now a definition of who constitutes a caretaker and the limitations on that. So that's the only substantive change.
okay, yeah. I saw the caretaker piece. In general, I guess, I think there was a question that some of us were having on the side about, if this changed at all, just kind of our ability as public members to attend other meetings and how any of that might be impacted, if at all, by.
Only as outlined in the exact language that's written here.
Okay. So this says 3 or more.
I'm sorry?
So this says under the FOIA Act to clarify that 3 or more members of a public body may appear. We've always gone under the, okay, so 3 or more. So basically, as many of us as wanted to could attend another public body's meeting. As long as
you're not conducting your business as part, if you're all attending and not participating in conducting school board business. Let me give you an example. If you're meeting with your board of supervisors and it's a joint meeting, it's always been our advice that you advertise it and take minutes as a joint meeting of yours and the board of supervisors. Did I misunderstand your question?
Yeah, so I guess it kind of drills down into, and we've had this conversation about committee meetings, right? So if we have committee meetings, if they are public committee meetings.
Well, may I interrupt you right there?
Please.
If there
Is that even a
are,
thing?
if they are committees that are appointed by this board to conduct the business of this board on this board's behalf, they are by definition public meetings and have to be advertised and minutes taken. There are questions about other kinds of committees. Let me give you an example. We defended a FOIA suit against a school division more than a decade ago, wherein the superintendent was having meetings to get information about redistricting. Once he brought his recommendations to the full board's meetings, including discussions with the folks who had given the data to inform the superintendent's recommendations, the school board's meetings were public. But a meeting of the superintendent and his staff to gather information to form the recommendations to the board are not subject to FOIA. Does that make sense? So it does depend on how the committees are formed and for what purpose.
Okay.
Chair Hudson, can I ask
Yeah, sure.
a follow-up question on this? So there's the two-pronged definition for public body. So it's the main public body, say the school board, but also committees that are formed. But one thing that's still unclear from the clarifying language of legislation that was passed is on the definition of public business, in the sense that, so can 3 board members attend, say, one of the board's committee if the purpose of the conversation has to do with, say, it's the special ed committee, just use it as an example, okay? The purpose of that meeting is not to talk about board business. So can 3 board members attend that secondary body if that secondary body is subsidiary of the main body? Does that make sense?
Well, I believe you will have already advertised the subsidiary body. If it is truly one of your committees, you will have given public notice of that meeting. So
Right.
if you attend, you're just attending because you're a board member.
But can 3, because
You've already advertised it, you're already taking minutes, which are the requirements under FOIA for a public meeting, so you will have already satisfied it.
Right, so it's not whether or not it's a public body. It's whether, say, school board members can attend that secondary of 1, 2, or 3, because the purpose, that's, the legislation was meant to clarify both public body and public business meeting.
And it was in light of a Supreme Court decision, yes.
Right, so my question is that can, say, 3 board members attend that secondary body if the purpose of that meeting is not to engage in school board business, but in whatever's being discussed by that committee?
Doc, I think the problem I'm having is I'm not jumping over the predicate with you. I believe that the meeting would have already been advertised, which is the requirement for FOIA. And so, yes, you can attend because it's already been advertised as a public meeting at which the board will be convening. It's just convening as a committee of the whole.
Right, so it's not about whether it's a public meeting or a public body, it's whether it would constitute a quorum if 3 board members attended that committee.
I think we're in circles, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry if I'm not being clear.
A scenario.
this a board-
and Can you give a
FOIA
hypothetical?
says that for any,
Is this a board-formed committee, or is this a superintendent-formed committee?
The example is, say, a special ed committee. That is a public body. So one of the reasons they passed this act is to clarify that 3 board members can participate in another public body in their meeting without violating FOIA unless the purpose of that meeting is to discuss that public body's meeting, business.
But if it's the spec ed committee, that is our business by definition.
Well, that's.
But it's also publicly advertised and our committee, so we're able to go there anyway.
so let me try it this way. The whole point of FOIA meeting requirements is to make sure that the public can see what you're doing, right? And it requires that when you have a public meeting of 3 or more of you, then you've got to advertise it and take minutes, which is why I keep saying that. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself. And so I think to your point, Doc, is that the meeting would have been advertised already, I presume, and minutes being taken. So it doesn't matter if 1, 2, or 7 of you appear for that because you've already met the FOIA requirement to advertise it. The question has always been whether or not 3 of you have convened to talk about something and the public's not aware that you're meeting. So in the example you gave, the public would be aware that you're meeting and is free to attend and watch. Does that make
Watch
sense?
is the key word, not participate, because we would be discussing the district's business.
Like where a vote would be taken, for instance, or negotiating policy, correct?
Right. So that would include the gifted committee, because they make recommendations to the board.
So we are allowed to discuss with them?
I think
or
that's
not?
the caveat that we're kind of hung up on here, Brad, is if we go to one of our own division's meetings that is public, but we get involved in that conversation, about it's school board business, right? Or is that allowed, or are we just allowed to be there like any other person in the public and not participate?
And I believe if it has been advertised as a public meeting, then you would be permitted to participate. I will triple check and I will send you an email tomorrow morning.
Okay.
So we would be able to participate in a committee that is going to be discussing school board business, that they will be bringing back recommendations
Correct,
to the
because
school
the
board.
public would be there to see you participating in that conversation, and in all likelihood, there would be a recommendation out of that committee to the full board. Then the full board would convene after a proper advertisement, where the public could again watch the full board's discussion of that recommendation.
Okay, so at what level do these meetings need to be advertised? Because I'm not sure that that's something that's
If,
happening.
again, if it is a committee appointed by the board to do the committee's work, it should be advertised.
Through the website or how?
Whatever yes.
I think one of the questions that we've had, and I think Dr. Bragan's group is working to clarify, is there are committees that meet that aren't board appointed, right? And so those meetings may or may not be public. I'm not sure if we know that answer, right?
I will get the chair and the superintendent an answer tomorrow.
Okay. There are certainly committees that meet that we don't elect board representatives to be a part of, right? But I guess the question is, could we still be a part of those meetings if we haven't elected somebody to represent the board there?
I understand the question.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Ms. Franklin?
So I know it wasn't deliberate, but I was skipped over as far as any comments around the literacy policy.
You asked the first question before we went around.
Did I?
You did.
On this policy?
Well, just in general, but we were just going around.
No, then a policy came up. I just asked a general question, but then there was specific policy that was being discussed, and I wasn't allowed to discuss that. So I am now. For me, just because the state says we need to have it, and this one they do not say we need to have it, and with all the issues around literacy and what should and should not be taught in schools and what books should not be done, I agree that why do we need to do overkill? Because then it just can kind of open the door for more things. Well, you did that, so why don't you just add this to it?
Okay. I know Dr. Guthrie had some more comments if we just want to keep going around.
Yeah, so this is a different one related to FOIA, and I don't have that many questions. So I was looking again at our FOIA policy, which is really quite circumscribed. It's mainly focused on closed meeting. Is there any reason why we don't have a more complete a FOIA board policy? Because there are changes made or clarification to FOIA, and we're not incorporating them because we just don't even address those issues in our policy, because our policy does not get into it doesn't detail those matters. So this isn't about the proposed changes, but I'm curious to know why we have such a circumscribed FOIA policy for the board.
I don't have the entire policy manual in front of me. I apologize. I only brought with me the proposed revisions for this evening. The one policy you have in front of you is 1-6.1, which is styled regular school board meetings. So it's in the section, your bylaws, about how you conduct your organizational business. And of course, for instance, we do have policies regarding records requests, which is another part of FOIA, which is, I think, in the second article of your policy manual. So it's not a comprehensive policy. I think it appears in different places. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I didn't look at the other
In
policies.
other words,
well.
FOIA is meetings and records primarily.
Right,
And the
right.
meetings piece appears in how you all as a board do your business in the bylaws. And then I believe FOIA requests for documents are governed by policies that are in Article 2 regarding your relationship with the public.
Right, so the debate we just had now, we don't even address because we don't actually talk about some of these issues. So it's not just, I know that there's a separate policy for records.
Okay.
But our meeting policy is very circumscribed. It's about, it's mainly, if not exclusive, I mean, there's a preamble to it, but the majority of it is focused just on closed meetings. And I was just wondering why it's not
Well, and I mean, beg to differ a little bit. The first 2 pages deal with closed meetings. The bottom of the 3rd page picks up electronic participation in meetings, and then at the end, electronic meetings more generally.
Sorry, closed
But
and
I think
electronic.
I
Yeah.
think it probably goes to, if I may, I think it goes to the same line drawing function that you just debated about the other piece. How much of an entire statute do you want replicated in policy? And how much do you want to communicate to the public that you understand what your roles and responsibilities are, how to conduct your meetings, when you will do your business in open and when you're permitted to do it in closed meeting?
Right,
That's
right.
I think that's the idea.
Right, because part of the reason we're having this question about what we can do and what we can't do is because we don't actually address it in policy. So that's the only reason why I asked. Why wouldn't we have it addressed in policy?
I do believe that there is, and again, I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, we could pull it up, but I think there's a policy on committees of the boards as well, which might be the best place to address the other question you raised. I'll be glad to look at that as I research the question.
Yeah, I'd appreciate if you would. I'm glad you're doing that because there are other board committees that are not in our policy for board committees. Like a textbook adoption committee is a board-approved committee, but it doesn't appear in our board policy as such.
It might appear in the textbook adoption policy. So your point about it being splintered, I get.
Do you have any other questions, Dr. Guthrie? Okay. Ms. Parton? Ms. Bond?
On the same subject or something different? Okay.
Spin the wheel.
I just, I have a question about the citizen participation policy 1-6.8. The changes basically had to do with students being, you can have them provide and I understand that we have, exceptions for out of residence, but should we have any language in there about requiring living in the county, your license or something, if that should be a problem? Or, because I tried to read through everything.
I had the same question you did. I asked my colleagues, where'd this come from? And I can only imagine that some student attempted
Right.
to appear before a board and someone said, are they really from here?
Right.
And so a legislator took a bill and promoted this revision. This just comes straight from the state statute.
Okay.
Again, it's sort of like the previous questions. I'm not sure it's required. We've offered it because it was a legislative change. You don't.
Well, I don't think that it's a horrible idea. I just wonder if we should note that, and I don't know how the verbiage that would go in it would be that you could require any speaker to provide.
Right, and many school boards that we represent will ask folks to identify when they get to the lectern their address.
Right, but that
And they
doesn't
just
mean
take
they
them at
could
their
give you
word.
anything.
I know,
mean,
I
they could
know.
give my address as far as that goes, but if, we have had times when community members have came from other areas and wanted to speak, and I understand if it's a grandparent or a caregiver, I get all that, but say if we did have through the wind thinking that there was someone coming that wanted to address the board, maybe sharply, let's say that, and a way of, because of the language that's here, just wondering.
Well, again, this was in response to a specific bill that was passed this year. Your opening sentence, as you see, says Montgomery County residents may appear. So you've already got that requirement.
Okay, well, then as far as that goes with the student, they're Montgomery County residents, so if we're requiring them to show identification, why wouldn't we require questionable, regular people to show identification? I just didn't want to say it that way, but there it is.
I think you can.
If there's a question, we can require students to, but why can't we require all citizens to, is my
I
point.
think, Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, and Ms. Franklin as well, I believe Ms. Drake used to get a list of the signups in advance, and you have to put your address down, and I believe, from what I've heard, because I have asked her in the past, she tells me that she has double-checked to verify that these people are at the address they're at, and it is a Montgomery County address. And if there is an exception on there, it is addressed to the board when that person gets up to speak that this person address was listed as Montgomery County. It actually is not Montgomery County, and we are giving an option to vote whether we want to hear that person speak or not, I believe.
Right,
If
and-
I can remember.
And further down here, it shares what they have to do, and I get all of that's there. I was just wondering why there was no language saying that we could require students, but we also, if needed, could require community members to show proof of living in Montgomery County. That's just a safety net if we ever needed it, if the next board ever needed it. May not be in the next 10 years, but 15 years down the road.
I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I think we're checking, but if we want to double check or whatever, or make it more to where they come up and they prove to us, because we're just getting it from the clerk or whoever we're getting it from, that this is where they're from. But I mean, I don't have a problem with making that verification, or adding that.
Well, I found it to be very discriminating against our students. And it does say may require, and I would hate to think that we are asking every student, because we have wonderful students who address us, that we say, let's see it before you start speaking. And we decided several years ago, with folks coming to people's homes or the possibility, because they didn't like what they were saying, that we were not requiring folks to do their address, but only their area of residence, to try to protect people. So that's how I feel about that. So I don't think it's needed. It's discriminatory.
And that would also limit, if, depending on how we might do it, it would also limit how late someone could sign up, right? We have a sign-up list out there that people could sign up, but we're not verifying their address probably in time for them to speak, so. But, yeah. But we did used to do it, right? So,
Well, people put their address down,
Wow.
but then once we passed that policy, that only Montgomery County residents or affiliation with students, folks tended to identify that they were out of the area, but they were the parent of a child who was in the district and were allowed to speak.
And my comments are more driven toward areas of conversation that might be high communicated area through our surrounding counties. That's it. I'm just saying, if you've got someone who wants to come, like I said, and speak sharply to a certain topic, and they're going to all school boards and speaking, that if we're going to require students to, not require, let me back up, if we should ever question that a student is not a student of Montgomery County, and we could require them to show identification, then my only question was, how come we don't have that same verbiage? That we could, if needed, require an identification of a community member. Not saying that we will, not saying that we should, only having that as a fallback to a situation where that could happen, and has happened in the past on heightened conversations that we've been having. We have, I remember when Ms. Drake was here, she started vetting that because we had people from other counties coming and wanting to express opinions about certain issues. So.
Yeah, and I remember when that really started, and most of that was around the discussion around the Confederate flag, and we had folks coming from Tennessee and North Carolina and all different places to speak at our board meetings. and our changes kind of squashed that.
Are we required to have this addition by state law, or are we just allowed to have this addition by state law?
I think it's not unlike what we've talked about before. The law permits you, as it says may, to require this. It doesn't require you to require it. But I think if you are going to do it, you would need to have a public pronouncement. And as I said 30 minutes ago, all of these are driven only by legislative changes. I'm not trying to be cute, Mr. Chairman. I'm just,
Yeah, sure, yeah. That's a fair point, right? Like,
they were drafted for your consideration because they were legislative changes about things that would impact your relationship with the public.
we could have done this before without being required. We're not being required to now. We're just being told, hey, this is something you could do, right?
Right.
With the may in there. So it's kind of a,
I mean, these students are already Montgomery County residents, students. So what does this provide us? If we are going to, if we do decide to require students to present a report card or their student ID, what does that do for us?
It
What's
makes
the
it
purpose?
I think the question's gotten way sidetracked to what I'm even, but again, I'm not trying to open a can of worms, but that's not even where I was going with that. It's not even about what we're putting in here. That's the safety net to where if we feel like a student's coming from another county wanting to chime in on, or a group of students protesting something and wanting to come to public address, this is just a safety net, if I'm right, that they said you can put this in your policy if you should need to use it. My only question was, if we put that in there or agree to put that in there, which is fine, I don't have any problem with it, but could we also include, you also may require citizens to show identification and proof of living in the county. If you should ever need to, it's there. Isn't that why we're doing this to all these policies? To cover anything that could happen. It's not about agreeing with it or disagreeing with it. I'm just saying that if you've got it for the safety net of students, why would you not have it for the safety net of those citizens that live outside the county that may want to come in and share their thoughts about what we're doing in Montgomery County?
so Brad,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, I just want to direct that question to Brad. So
I'm not aware of anything that would preclude you from doing that. You're allowed to put reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions on your public address.
Thank you.
A lot of people don't realize this. You're not even required to have public address.
That's right.
But once you do, as Ms. Franklin has pointed out, you've got to treat folks equitably and in a non-discriminatory fashion. And you can't violate their First Amendment rights once you've opened that forum. And so you can't say we don't want people that are going to express a certain viewpoint, but you can place restrictions on the audience to, I believe, I would have to confirm, but I believe that there is case law that says restricting to residents of your county because they are taxpayers and are interested in the outcomes of your board meetings and more particularly the operation of the schools is permissible.
Is what our policy says.
And how do we handle compassionately those citizens that are homeless, providing their residencies?
I didn't say provide the residents. Okay,
They have to provide proof of residence.
we're not saying that we have to do
But-
this.
yeah,
Right, no, you're saying to add in there that we may require them to.
may.
Residence, right, so if we say we may, and we start doing it, how do we handle?
No, I didn't say start doing it.
No, but it allows us to start doing it.
let's do it every year. And if that was the
I think if we do it at all, then we gotta do it kind of on a regular basis, because
They have not lived in Montgomery County. They do not live in Montgomery County.
but if we start requiring the proof, then, and we don't do it on a every person basis, then we start opening our liability to saying that we're discriminating on who we're asking the documentation from.
If that's the mindset of that, then we need to strike that, because that's, the school board may request any Montgomery County Public School student to provide a current student identification card or school
I'm kind of
document,
okay
then,
with striking it.
I mean,
Yeah,
I mean,
because we already have a policy in place that can address that if that should come up. And why do we need to just keep doing stuff because Richmond says do it, because in someplace else, they didn't have something in place.
well,
And,
and
yeah,
agree.
just-
And backtracking, that's not what even my question was for. But, and I understand again, the only reason I question is because anybody can say they live anywhere and write anything. So that's,
Chair Hudson, can I ask a question along these lines really quickly of
said
Mr.
anything.
King?
Sure.
So if we include, I think to put a finer point on this question, if we include this language and at some point the board does this to a student, says we need to see your ID, do we then afterward have to require every student to do so? Otherwise, we could be accused of discriminating against one student versus the other unless we have reason to believe that there's some deception. So I think that's the question is not just can we do this, but if we do this, we have an obligation to make it universal, to make sure it's equitable if we do start to enforce it. Because what we did before, where we required the address, everyone was asked to give their address. So if we include this and start saying to us, either a group of students, okay, we need to see your ID, then we have to then do it with every student to make sure that we're not, I think I made my point there. What's your judgment on that?
So the one great thing about being a lawyer is we always get to say it depends, right? I've said that to you before. What we don't know yet now is how a court would interpret this language. I think the conservative approach legally would be exactly what you said, that we just require as a matter of course that people stand up and show them. I think that would be pragmatically a nightmare. And I think probably if you adopted a practice that says if we have reason to suspect that someone has misrepresented their residency status, whether it's an adult or a child, and in those instances you treat people fairly, you will likely be okay, or we would be able to argue that that has been your practice and that you have applied it fairly. I do think that there is room for some problems on the margins, so we would need to be careful about that.
Okay. Let's keep going around. I think before you open that can of worms, I think Ms. Purcell, you're next. About that policy or anything.
Yeah, I don't think I have any other
Okay.
questions about that policy or, thank you.
Okay. Dr. Roundtree.
Yeah, unless for some reason I change my mind, I don't think I will at this point. I'll be voting against the additions to 1-6.8 and against policy 6-3-1 or 0.16. I have no further additions.
Okay. Ms. Franklin.
Okay, so policy 7-1.3, student records. Why would we only keep students with disabilities, their records, for 7 years and not forever like we do all other students?
Ms. Franklin, I did not compare this before I came down. I apologize. You probably know that the Library of Virginia prescribes record retention schedules. I believe that this was added to a statute to specifically address probably concerns expressed from the disability rights community. And I don't know off the top of my head whether or not that 7-year period is different than what is already required for other students who graduate. I just don't remember what the time period is, but that's something else I can easily check for you.
Because I think it says that we keep all others unless we're asked to not keep them, to discard them. So.
Yeah, again, the Library of Virginia already prescribes how long you must keep the scholastic records of graduates. There is, as you notice in this paragraph, a requirement that we notify parents of their students' rights, which frankly I believe overlap what's required under the federal law regarding notification of a disabled student's rights, child with a disability's rights, excuse me.
Okay, again, my concern is if we're keeping all other students' records forever, why would we not do the same thing for our disabled students unless they asked for them to be discarded?
Understand the question.
Given to them.
And if your practice is, if you're doing more than what this law requires, then certainly you're fine, as long as you're treating the records of students with disabilities the same way you are with non-disabled students.
Yeah, it just seems like whatever those folks were doing in Richmond was not equitable to everybody in the Commonwealth of Virginia, because many of them just seem very discriminating. So unless, like you said, there's something with the ADA that says this is what we do, then, but I don't like to know what that is.
Board, any other comments on other policies? Dr. Guthrie?
Thank you so much for answering all of these questions. I do have, there are a couple of small grammatical issues with the changes. Can I just?
Yeah, before you begin with that, I will tell you that I brought a clean copy of 6-3.16 because I caught several there as well. I have a clean copy of that I'm glad to give to the clerk if the board adopts it. If the board doesn't adopt it, then there won't be a need to do that. But regarding others, I'm glad to address your concerns.
Okay, so mine is about 752 in light of HB 732, SB 726, having to do with the opioid crisis. We've had a lot of conversation about the opioid crisis, and I know looking at this that we're not required until next school year to implement these changes. Is it so I'm new to the school board, so we're receiving recommendations for policy changes based on legislation. The literacy plan was not coming from the school board. For that particular plan, are we waiting until next school year for you to develop that policy for us, or what's the reason for waiting until next year to address that?
Yes, normally we bring you policy changes that are driven by the effective dates required from the legislation. However, we also work with the administration, and if the administration has, or if the board directs that it wants a policy developed in a certain area in advance of or completely separate from, then we entertain those as well. But we just bring you those that we're aware of that we think are required by current legislation.
I would love to see the school board not wait a whole year to work on this policy. So I understand why it's not before us right now, but if we know if it's coming, we've had conversations about it, and we want to see something developed, it makes sense to me to do that this year.
Which policy was that, Dr. Guthrie? I'm sorry. What's that? Which policy were you referring to there?
So it's on page...
I think he's speaking from our General Assembly update that we also provide.
Yeah, on the bottom of page 19.
It's 18.
Well, in my combined PDF, it's the one that has HB, sorry, you're right, 18. It's rather long, 752. Yeah, it's public schools, opioid antagonist procurement. We just had a student present on this issue. Yeah, page 18.
Board, any other comments? I won't keep calling on you at this point. Just open floor if anybody has anything.
Oh, there's one more thing, and I promise I'll stop. So I know that there now needs to be a liaison for special ed, a public liaison, an employer.
Parent
teach-
liaison.
Yeah. And it just says that we need to have one. Is it getting too much into administration for the policy to delineate how that, say, that person is selected, how long they serve, what that function is? Or, is that, you know what I'm asking there?
I do, and my instinct is yes, that should be probably left to the discretion of the administration. But I certainly would think that the administration would receive your thoughts about it and your preferences. You also know that you have a parent resource center that serves the special needs community already. So this is layered on top of that, as I understand it.
Right, because I believe that that person is appointed by the school board?
Which person, I'm sorry, the liaison?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
check.
If we are responsible, and this is not to usurp the authority of the administration with regard to that position, it's just a general question about administration versus policy.
Well, I think, as you know, all educators in the school division are appointed by the board upon the recommendation of the superintendent. And I don't know, I'm not aware of, I should say, any specific parameters for the employment of this liaison other than what's in that paragraph as described in the statute.
Okay,
So it could be that there'll be a job description developed coordinating with your special needs community about what that position should look like to make sure it satisfies the statutory requirements. Does that make sense?
yes, total. Thank you so much.
Okay, board, any other questions or comments? Okay, so it sounded like there are a couple of policies that the folks had concerns about, maybe didn't want to accept as is. I was going to propose maybe give me that list. You listed a couple, Dr. Roundtree. I'll get all those numbers, and maybe we do a motion to approve everything but that in bulk, and then we can handle each one of those individually. Does that seem fair? Okay.
Wait, you're saying at the next board meeting? Or now?
Now. Yeah, this is second reading.
I just turned it off. If there's still concerns and clarity that's needed with some of them, that doesn't mean we have to approve it tonight.
Board, what's your?
I think that's what you asked for, is if there's ones that we have concerns about, give them to you, and then we'll vote on the others in bulk, and then we can further discuss those ones that
Sure.
we have questions about.
Yeah, if we disapprove, if we don't approve one tonight, that means we're going to go back and I guess we could review it with the lawyers. We could just choose and just adopt it altogether, depending upon what the concern is. So,
All right.
Does that seem reasonable, Ms. Franklin? Approve the
still-
ones that we're good with.
So you want us to, right now, tell you which ones we had questions about and we're waiting on? Okay, so
Yes.
7-13 for me.
7-1.3. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Was that the only one that you had, Ms. Franklin?
The public address for students.
1-6.8.
Yeah.
Yeah, got that one. You had another one, Dr. Roundtree, I believe.
6-3.16. That's the one that Dr. Guitry brought up for literacy.
6-3.16.
Yep.
Okay. Were there any others, board? Any others anyone had concerns about? Yeah, okay. Okay. Tasha, are you okay with the motion that excludes those three? I can read them back out to you. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the legislative policy revisions as presented with the exception of policy 1-6.8, 7-1.3, and 6-3.16.
Yeah, got it.
Okay?
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Roundtree and Dr. Gittrey. Any more discussion, board? Okay. Ms. Osborne, please call the roll.
Ms. Bond,
Yes.
Ms. Franklin,
Yes.
Dr. Gitchery.
Yes.
Ms. Barton,
Yes.
Ms. Purcell,
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree,
Yes.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion carries. Okay, so now we'll deal with each one of those individually. Oh. Yes? Okay. So do I have a motion to approve the legislative policy revisions for policy 1-6.8?
When you say revisions, I don't understand what you mean.
We're
The red
approving the
lines.
policy as revised by Sands Anderson. Or we're making a motion to.
A motion to not approve them? Is that what you're saying? I don't understand what we're doing.
Motion to approve.
If we just, what I was saying, I wanted more information on 7-13.
Okay.
Why are those
Okay,
students?
so yours is more of an information request.
Right.
Okay.
May
So we
make-
could table that one if that's, I mean, I guess again, what I was hearing, I heard some people, they were just opposed to the policy, period. So we're going to vote because we need to vote. And if we vote against it, then we don't adopt it, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And if you have questions that need to be answered, then we can table that vote until we get the answers that we need and then vote on it separately. Do you have a better suggestion, Ms. Franklin?
From what I was understanding, I was hearing from board members is that with those policies, there were still questions about why they were written the way they were written. If we indeed needed to have them, period.
So 1-6.8 is the students requiring ID policy. And it's, as I understood it, it sounded like you were opposed to having students require IDs. I am, and we were,
Okay, I'll follow you on that one. Go ahead.
Brad suggested that we don't have to include that language, we're just allowed to include that language.
Yeah, but to your point, so we'll go item by item. If there's an outstanding information request, then we'll table that one. If it's just a matter of we're going to vote for it or not, then we'll vote, okay? So 1.6.8, as Dr. Roundtree stated, I believe, was just some of us don't want to do that. So we're going to vote on it. And if we vote no, then, sorry, Brad.
So moved
Okay,
for a vote.
second, okay. So Dr. Roundtree, Ms. Bond, any more discussion about 1-6.8? Ms. Osborne, please call the roll.
Ms. Bond,
No.
Ms. Franklin,
And this is not to include it, right? No. I mean, yes,
Wait.
not to include
No,
it.
no, it's moved to include it. No is to not include it.
Oh, really messing with me tonight.
Could you restate the motion that's on the table?
Yeah.
The
There wasn't
motion
a-
is to adopt 1-6.8 as presented to the board,
To exclude it?
to accept it.
They accept it? Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Roundtree.
So we're back to me?
Yes,
No.
okay.
Dr. Gitchery,
No.
Barton,
No.
Purcell,
No.
Dr. Roundtree,
No.
Mr. Hudson.
No.
7 opposed.
Motion fails. So we will not be adopting that one. Okay, next up was around 7-1.3, and if I review our list, 1-1.3, that was the one around student records. So that's the one that Ms. Franklin raised, I believe, a question. Is that true?
Right,
Okay.
yeah. Why are we getting rid of those students' records? Yeah.
So in that one, we have an information request. So what is the request?
Why are we getting rid of those students' records when other students are kept forever? That was my question.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I understood the question and maybe a motion to table it.
Okay.
I motion that we table policy 71.3 until we have more information.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Just for discussion, I just have a question about that. Could that be pertaining to someone that may want students' files deleted or scratched, and then,
Ms. Bond, if you'll allow me, I'm going to ask if I can figure out what the genesis of the bill was. There were several, as you've already commented on, that relate to the rights of disabled persons and students in particular and their parents. And I think Ms. Franklin's question was, this seems a shorter period of time than what we already do for non-disabled peers' records. So I'm going to check the Library of Virginia's records. I'll talk to Dr. Bregan and his staff about what their maintenance practices are, make sure they're okay, and then I'll send an email to the chair and the superintendent for them to circulate to you all.
It's a vote to table.
okay.
Yeah.
Motion to table is what I was recommending.
So the motion was by Dr. Guitry, and the second, I apologize, I missed. Do you have the second, Tosh?
I thought I did it.
Okay, Ms. Franklin, okay. Okay, any more discussion?
Yes, so if it's as it's written here, I would be voting, and we were voting on it, I'd be voting no, because we already retain all student records for indefinitely. And this just says that we can, or we shall retain them for at least 7 years. So with the further information, I just wanted to make sure that legally we're okay with a no vote on adopting that language, and that we'll just retain all student records indefinitely.
The only thing I need to triple check, sorry to be a lawyer, is the second sentence, which relates to any notification requirements. Again, I think you're correct. If you're keeping them indefinitely, we would just want to make sure that you're notifying parents that you're keeping them indefinitely.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. We have a motion to table, we have, in a second, any more discussion? Ms. Osborne, please call the roll.
Ms. Bond?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Dr. Guitry?
Yes.
Ms. Parton?
Yes.
Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion carries to table. That policy is tabled until we hear back from Mr. King. Okay, and the last one was 6-3.16. I remember the discussion on that one. That was more whether we want to do it or not. Or was there an information request associated with that one as well?
Just do it or not.
Do it or not do it? Okay. So can I have a motion pertaining to policy 6-3.16?
I motion that we accept policy 6-3.16 as presented.
Second.
Okay. Motion by Dr. Roundtree and a second by Ms. Parton. Any more discussion? Ms. Osborne, please call the roll.
Ms. Bond?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin?
No.
Dr. Guitry?
No.
Ms. Parton?
Yes.
Ms. Purcell?
No.
Dr. Roundtree?
No.
Mr. Hudson?
No.
5 opposed and 2 in favor.
Motion does not carry. Motion fails. Okay. Okay, so I think we got through all the policies, all passed with the exception of 6-3.16 and 1-6.8, and we tabled 7-1.3. Good? Okay, great. Great job, board. And thank you, Brad, for being here tonight. Obviously, that was the main reason that we wanted you here, other than just seeing your lovely face. Of course.
Thank you, Mr. King.
You're welcome to hang out. We're a pretty lively bunch, as you can tell.
I have a 3.5-hour drive back to Richmond. I think I'll get going if you don't mind.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Okay. Next up is our reports from the superintendent. Dr. Bergen, if you would, sir.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Hudson. As you all know, students and staff returned to the buildings for the first day of school last Tuesday, and I'm just happy to report that we had a great opening and what I hope will be a fantastic school year. For me, it was really exciting to get to visit the classrooms and see the enthusiasm and excitement displayed by the students and staff alike, and that doesn't happen by accident. So I just want to take a moment to thank all of our teachers, all of our administrators, all of our staff that worked all summer long to make sure we had a great opening and our classrooms were ready for the return of staff and students last Tuesday. And one of the best parts about this job is that I get to visit each of the classrooms on a regular basis. And it's unfortunate that all of you don't get to see that every day or on a regular basis on so many great things that occur within our schools and our buildings and in our classrooms. And it's something that, you know, when I'm having a bad day, I like to go out and visit the classrooms because sometimes we get caught up in, you know, the deliberate process like we did today. It's really important to go over policy and do all those things because where that rubber meets the road is in the classroom. And we got great schools with great kids and great teachers, and I'm just so thankful to get to be a part of it. Off to a great start to what I hope is a great year. And thank you for everyone that was involved in putting that together. The second thing I wanted to talk about was I know we had discussions about the hate speech policy that we're still working on it, and we want to make sure we get it right, and we're doing some research and getting some other ideas from other school divisions that have one in place already. And we're going to bring that to you hopefully for the next board meeting, and that'll be a first read. You know, have discussions and debates about what you all think we should include and not include. And we're also delaying the second read of the Code of Conduct because we want to bring those at the same time because there will be some impact for that policy for the Code of Conduct if that meets with your approval. And that's all I have, sir.
Dr. Bergen, I hear we have a new FOIA officer. Is that true?
I believe we do.
Yeah, who's that?
Ms. Tasha Osborne is now the new FOIA officer for the district. I will no longer be responsible for those duties. Thank the good Lord.
Thank you, Tosh, for taking on that role. Board, any questions for Dr. Bergen regarding his report? Okay, great. Next up, Dr. Mike Stanley, the principal from Montgomery Central, will share a presentation with us about Montgomery Central. And you brought friends.
Good evening, Dr. Bergen. It's good to see you. For the board members that I know, I say hello. And for those of you that I do not, let me introduce myself. I'm Mike Stanley. I am the principal of alternative programs for the school division. Montgomery Central is where the old Christiansburg Middle School was years ago. It is now the Operations Center. Many of you have probably been there. I'll go through a presentation, and I have a couple staff members and a student that'll speak today, give you a little insight into what we do there. You have some information. This is a more detailed description in case there are specific questions you might have. I'll be glad to answer any questions, but kind of the presentation will be more of an overview of what we do, and then this gives you a little more detailed information that you might have. So Montgomery Central is composed of the 8 secondary schools in the school division. That's the Auburn, Blacksburg, Christiansburg, and Eastern Montgomery, or Shawsville Strands. We also have the GED program, which we started today at our, that was formerly in the past, that was done at each of the 4 high schools. So now all those programs are offered at Montgomery Central. So you can see the umbrella there on the left, and of course, like I said, you have detailed information on those programs, but Independent Secondary was created back in the late 1980s. Rivendell was a program that was mostly for special education students. There was Wilson Avenue, which was for many students that had court involvement. And then also there was a Phoenix program that we had at Montgomery Central or Independent Secondary, where students were suspended and then brought to Montgomery Central for a certain period of time, sometimes a day, sometimes 3 days. And so we have phased that out. And again, you can read that information, some of the reasons that was phased out. And we've also phased out all those other programs because now the program at Montgomery Central is all inclusive, and all of our students are in a special ed and regular ed or in a setting where they're taught by regular education teachers and then supported in the classrooms, in all of their classrooms as well. We have three major things that we really try and work on at Montgomery Central. All students that come to Montgomery Central, no matter how they arrive there, have a meeting, an intake meeting with myself and their parent as well as themselves. And then if they're special ed, with our lead special education teachers. We talk about academics. We want to improve their academics. We talk about how we're going to do that. We talk about how those things have or have not gone well in the past. We also talk about behavior modification. We try and help students. We try and teach them the correct way to behave, but ultimately we put some of that on their parents as well as themselves, and we enforce the code of conduct at our school. Our building is a very safe building. It's a good place to be. I think that sometimes there's a stigma attached to our building, and I think you'll hear when you hear some of my staff and a student speak tonight kind of about maybe what Montgomery Central really is. It's a really good place to be. We also have a lot of mental health support. We have a school counselor. We have two counselors that are with us from New River Valley Community Services. They have full caseloads. About almost 70% of our students have some type of outside mental health supports. So it is really a place where we try and meet kids where they are and try and help these young people become productive members of society. There are three different programs that we have. We have students who are placed at Montgomery Central who have IEPs. All of those IEP placements go through the IEP process. There's a committee that I meet with, as well as central office members who are part of that committee. And so no student is placed at Montgomery Central without that has an IEP without consultation, interventions that have been tried through their schools. And so I feel very confident. We do have quite a few students at our school with IEPs, and we have a lot of support to go there to help with that. And so I'm very pleased with the progress that we've been able to make at Montgomery Central with our students with IEPs. Students are also placed at Montgomery Central or recommended at Montgomery Central by their principal. There is a committee that meets every 9 weeks. We review, so principals from each of the 8 secondary schools bring students forward every 9 weeks. That 9-week committee consists of myself, my school counselor, my lead special education teacher, at least 2 central office members, a principal, and a counselor from the other school. So it is really a group process. Students are reviewed. Some students go back to their schools after 9 weeks or a semester, depending. And then some students elect to stay long-term, which is a good problem that we're beginning to have as our numbers are increasing because students come to Montgomery Central and then they want to stay because we try and really wrap around them and show them how much we care and do the things that we think are most important from a staff standpoint to help them be successful. There are also students in our GED program. We began that program this year. We had 7 students start that program this morning, and we have another one that'll be starting on Thursday. And so students, there's an entire list of how students can and cannot get into the GED program, and that's in your packet. Students must be at least a grade level behind. They have to have certain scores on their math and reading in order to do that. There are some exceptions that can be made, but we try not to do that very often. Students in that program are required to follow the same rules and student code of conduct as those students that are not in the GED program but in our regular education program. There's a list of courses that we offer. We offer math, science, social studies, English, as well as art, and we started a music course for some of our students this year. We have a PE course that we started this year, which is pretty exciting. We got a new basketball court outside, and we've been able to do some things out there that we have not been able to do in the past. And so that I really appreciate the folks that helped make that happen over the past few years. That's been a really big thing for our students to be able to blow off a little energy outside, especially on these days when it's so warm and being inside all day is a little difficult. So that protocol for accessing Montgomery Central that you see, that as you can see, it's really a multi-tiered approach to how that happens. Students do not just appear at Montgomery Central. There is a pretty in-depth process. I go through and talk to central office folks on a regular basis about their thoughts as well as principals, and then we try and help the needs of each of our schools throughout the division. And we've been very successful over the last, I'm starting my 7th year. I always say that maybe if you've been somewhere so long, you start to become that place. And I think maybe that's my place after all these years. And we're starting to really see some success build with brothers and sisters and siblings and parents coming back who remember the old days. And people are just really, they want to help. The community wants to help. And it's really a good place to come. Last year, we did have 14 students that graduated from Montgomery Central with a standard diploma. We also had 4 GED. We also run the summer school program for secondary schools out of our building. I'm the administrator for that, and probably 70% of the staff are my teachers that work with the summer school staff. This past year, we had over 80 students get credit during summer school, and so that's pretty exciting too. There's a lot of good things going on in our building. And so with that said, I would like to ask Miss Sarah Burris if she would come forward. Miss Burris is my 11-month administrative assistant. I have to thank Dr. Bragan for putting in the resources. That was a 5-hour a day, 10-month position, and he listened to me, and I really appreciate that. We've got a really quality candidate. I've asked her to come forward and talk because she is a former teacher in another part of the county, and she'll talk about that. But she's helped make a difference at Montgomery Central.
Hello, my name is Sarah Burris, and I'm the administrative assistant at Montgomery Central. I'm going to begin by sharing with you my background and experience so far in Montgomery County and how that led me to Montgomery Central. I student taught in this county. I was first at Gilbert Lincas Elementary in Blacksburg, and also I was at Auburn Middle School in Reiner. I graduated in 2011 and substituted all over the county for 3 years. And in 2014, I was hired to teach art part-time at Harding Avenue Elementary. And in 2015, I was hired as the full-time art teacher at Gilbert Lincas Elementary. While I was a teacher at GLE, I led after-school art classes. I also happened to teach a class at Blacksburg Middle School, and I was a member of the SAP team. The SAP team made a huge impression on me as a teacher and as a person. I saw how individualized academic plans support students' needs and how a team can work together to help students meet their goals. Earlier this year, I made a career change and was hired as the administrative assistant at Montgomery Central. Despite my experience across the county, I wasn't sure what to expect. I quickly learned that Montgomery Central is all about student success. It provides a smaller learning environment with dedicated staff that is prepared to meet students exactly where they are. At the beginning of the school year, I asked the staff, "Why are you here? Why Montgomery Central?" Each one of them answered, "Because of the students." Our teachers differentiate instruction to support student academic needs, and they work alongside Dr. Stanley, Ms. Lawson, Mr. Medford, and our counseling team to create those individualized plans for each student. Montgomery Central is definitely unique. It gives MCPS students a different route to success. This program is truly a team. Everyone has a role, and we work together each day to support our students. I've only been on the team for 6 months, and I've already seen quite a bit of success. And I'm very grateful that Montgomery County Public Schools supports this program for our secondary students. It's making a really big difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burris. I'd like to introduce Angie Witt. Angie is a teacher at Montgomery Central. She teaches English. She is our reigning Teacher of the Year. She also worked with me for 7 years when I was at Christiansburg High School. So she'll talk a little bit about her experiences and how they're a little different.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Angie Witt, and I'm an English teacher at Montgomery Central. I've worked with Dr. Stanley at CHS when I was originally hired in Montgomery Central. I taught English for well over a decade and decided I needed something different. So school had already started when I began at Montgomery Central, and I took my lesson plans and I had anticipated differentiating the instruction for the students once I got there. But boy, I ain't gonna lie, it took a long time for me to get my legs under me. I had multiple education degrees, extensive professional development, and I had a wide range of support from teachers, but nothing prepared me for this unique program at Montgomery Central. Everyone's aware of students' avarice to school, but at Montgomery Central, students want to be there. And I'm fortunate to work with a unique guild of teachers who have created a program where every student is successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. And the last person I'd like to speak is Nevaeh Kohut. Nevaeh is a student who attends Blacksburg High School, and that's where she will graduate, but she's a Montgomery Central student. So when she graduates, all students that graduate from their home school. No one graduates from Montgomery Central, so Christiansburg and Eastmont. Without sharing too much, I will say Nevaeh was struggling to go to school before she came to Montgomery Central. And she really touched my heart a couple years ago when she came into my office and kind of talked to me a little bit about how it had changed her life. So I'll let her share a little bit with you.
Hi, my name is Nevaeh Kohat. I transferred this past year into Montgomery Central. The journey to where I am now was tough. I was dealing with heavy anxiety and depression with many aspects of public high school in my sophomore year. I felt like I couldn't fit in no matter what I did. I couldn't focus on my work because of the amount of pressure I felt I was under. I struggled so much when I failed virtual school, I decided I was going to drop out and get my GED instead. I felt hopeless, lost, and defeated. When my parents and I went to meet with Mr. Stanley, he offered the opportunity of coming to Montgomery Central. I was hesitant, not wanting a repeat of my past, but I accepted, wanting one last shot at proving myself capable. And I don't regret that decision. From the first day I came here, I felt, for the first time, comfortable in my own skin. Students and teachers have made me feel actually excited and energized to be going to school. Ever since I came to Montgomery Central, the passion to work, learn, and socialize has been relit inside of me. I feel like I can reach higher lengths and have a future that I can build with my own hands. Ever since coming here, I've been happier with myself and my life, and I can't express my gratitude enough for it. After I graduate, I plan to go to New River Community College, and from there, I want to strive even higher. I want to thank Montgomery Central for welcoming me and giving me the passion to keep going, and I want to thank everyone else in my life for believing in me too. Thank you.
So thank you for the time to be able to give you a little information about what we do. I really do hope if you have the opportunity, you could come visit us sometime. You're always welcome. There are lots of Nevaehs there. She's just one example of what we do. And thank you again for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Board, any questions for Mr. Stanley or from our friends from Montgomery Central?
I want to thank you all for coming and sharing. And Nevaeh, throughout the years, I've heard so many stories from students who've attended whatever the name may be, Independent Secondary, Rivendell, whatever, who have said how those settings help change their lives. So thank you. So my question would be, so throughout the years, we had the different programs and they were in different areas. So now they're all together, and your statements about students wanting to stay at Montgomery Central, which at one point was independent secondary where there were, long-term students. So is there more staffing needed, more room? What is needed to help to support that?
Well, I will say Dr. Bragan has come over and kind of talked about what we do and don't need. We are in, we have a PE teacher, and we're working on that right now. There could be a need for additional staff down the road, especially as we're climbing towards 70 students right now. And right now we're able to manage that. We have a lot of different balls in the air at one time. We were able to have, we're teaching music this year, which is something we've not taught in the past. But there may come a time when we're going to really need to look at what the program can and can't do as we get bigger and bigger. But Dr. Bragan his conversations with me have been nothing but positive. Tell me what you need. Tell me how we need to make it happen. And so I'm excited about the future. I think we're going to continue to grow.
So one more question. So our long-term students, I'm old school, so independent secondary, right? Versus Phoenix students who are there for shorter periods of time. How are they the same classrooms? How does that work?
So the Phoenix, and that'll be in your packet. So the Phoenix program was dissolved a few years ago. So the Phoenix program was more for students that were suspended for like a day or 3 days. So we don't house those students anymore. Now a student that came before the board that was suspended for 9 weeks or that came to a smaller hearing that was suspended, they would go into regular classes. But we tried a lot different things with the Phoenix program, but housing it and who was coming and who wasn't was almost impossible for us to do. At the time of the pandemic in March of 2020, we had done 1,600 days of suspension where we had had students come in. I keep that right near my desk because I remember that it was every single day, the phone ringing all the time. Somebody's coming for a day or 2 days or 3 days or 5 days. It was really just too much to manage. And so now those students do not come to our school currently.
So when they're 10-day suspensions, the students, where do they go?
So students that are suspended to their house. One of the reasons that we had started the Phoenix program years before was when they were suspended like that, it was coded as ISS at Montgomery Central. And so it was not being coded correctly for the state. And it was really to keep our suspension rates down because it wasn't counting as a suspension. And we were informed that we weren't allowed to use that code any longer.
So students who are, say, 10 days and under, they're just going home.
They can, if they're special education, they can get services. They should be able to still access their information through Google, the Google platforms. But yes, at other schools, that they would be at home. Yes.
Thank you.
We'll go around. Dr. Roundtree.
Thank you all for the wonderful presentation and speaking to Montgomery Central. It's a great program that serving our students. Thanks.
Ms. Purcell.
I did just want to say you are very fortunate to have someone like Sarah Burris on your staff. As a GLE parent, I'm very familiar with her, so congratulations on that. And I did want to ask, you mentioned, Dr. Stanley, that you have about 70 students, and I know the programs have been shifting. How many are kind of permanent, and how many flex in and out? And it's probably hard to
Right. So I'll just give you some ballpark figures. So probably 4 years ago, we would start off with about 30 students, and we would finish the year with about 50. We started this year with about 50 to 55. And as school has started, some of our students that we transitioned back to their regular school have just not been able to make it already. And we've seen some needs coming from other parts. And so probably the long-term students are probably in the 60% range. We're looking at probably graduating 8 to 10 students in December as well. So that's pretty exciting. Like, we are starting to see the fruits of our labor, I guess you would say. We also have students that attend some of their home schools, and the ultimate goal is for all students to return to their home schools. But for a variety, we have a mental health crisis in the country and in our county as well. I'm very fortunate all the support that we have within RVCS, our own school counselor, NCG. We do groups. We have pull-out. We have a job coach that's been coming. He hasn't started yet. We have the DARS program as well that we have a meeting on next week. The amount of people that are willing to come in and help us has been, it's really been pretty unbelievable. I think I answered your question.
Yeah, I think so. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yes,
Just one more question. So you serve the middle and high school students. What is about the disbursement? Is it roughly 10 students per grade, or is it a little less?
So the middle school is probably about 20 to 25 right now, if I was guessing, and probably we have, again, 7 GED students, so I'm counting them in those numbers, and so probably, I guess that's probably about 40 high school students right now in a ballpark.
Thank you so much.
Ms. Bond.
Well, I hear nothing but great comments, and I hear from a lot of parents that sometimes don't always see a light at the end of the tunnel. The students are just real discouraged. The parents are discouraged, and they've come to Montgomery Central and they find that light. So appreciate everything you do. I know you do good work, and we hear it in the community. So that speaks volumes. Thanks.
Ms. Parton.
So, Dr. Stanley, a lot of questions have been asked that I was going to ask, so I can save you from that part of it. But I do want to commend you so much on your presentation and our packet, because it gives me a whole lot more information about stuff that I would be bothering the administration asking questions on. So thank you for providing that. And I do want to thank all of you for taking your time tonight to come here and talk about what a great place Montgomery Central is. The last almost 8 years I've been on the board, it's been so exciting to see and hear this part of our school system grow and become in such a great light, rather than being looked upon as somewhere, you know, maybe not as great. Thank you for turning it into what it is now, and he couldn't do that with all of you. So I commend you for bringing your knowledge, your time, your experience to help these kids. It's greatly appreciated. And Nevaeh, I know it's hard to public speak. I commend you for getting up here, girl, and getting in front of us and giving your testimony. And I will tell you, you brought tears to my eyes, happy tears. But thank you, because I know it makes my heart happy to see you succeeding, and I think you're going to reach other students too. So thank you so much for having the courage to come up here and share your story. And God bless all of you. Thank you very much.
Dr. Guidry.
Thank you. And just to echo what everybody else has said, thank you so much for the presentation. I have one question and a recommendation or an observation that I think, there's sometimes when we get reports of data from the district, I don't see, there was one that I didn't see Montgomery Central, and I think it had to do with test scores or something. And I thought to myself, we should include Montgomery Central in all of our reporting, because it's one of our schools. But my question is about summer school. You said that Montgomery Central housed or directed or was responsible for summer school for secondary, right? There were some changes that were made, I believe, this summer in extending the time for summer school and the hours. Is that correct?
Well, let me address the first. So Montgomery Central is actually a program, and so all scores are reported back to they go into the high school scores. Now, I do have those broken down. I will tell you, for example, we had, I believe, 75% of our reading score. We got 75% on our reading scores. That's the highest we've ever had at Montgomery Central. You have to remember that a lot of these students have maybe never passed, and we had about 80%, I believe, of our math scores last year. Our Algebra 1 scores were passes in math. That is just unbelievable at the high school level.
Yeah.
For summer school, Montgomery Central, which was, we house all the high school students. We did not extend our day. That was done at the elementary and the middle school level.
Okay.
So ours was still a condensed 3-week program. One of the things that we found is getting teachers. So I had almost no turnover with my summer school. I had one new teacher this year, and that's pretty incredible. I'll also say we had no new teachers in our building this year for the New Teacher Academy. And so that's pretty exciting too. That means that people want to come back and they believe in what we're doing. And so we, Dr. Bragan and Dr. Wickham and I really worked on the schedule for summer school, and we started the day after Memorial Day, and we still finished by the 20th of June, which was real important for the staff, and it really, the students bought into continue to buy into what we're doing, and that has been really helpful. So we did not go to July 4th or 5th or whatever that other day. It's more of because it's really a recovery. Students that come to high school summer school are coming to recover credit for classes that they did not pass. They don't need to take the entire class over again.
Right. Thank you for the clarification, and I'm really happy to hear that there's that retention is as high as it is, because I know that's an issue. Yeah, and thank you for clarification on the data. So even if it's not reporting, it's really wonderful to actually to know what's going on, because otherwise, I mean, if you were a student saying that, where am I in the data? But thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Board, any more comments, questions? All right. Next up, Dr. Bragan and Joshua Bauer from the Senior Project Manager with Crabtree, Rohrback and Associates will provide a capital planning update, presentation, and no action expected. Task, you pull the slides.
So initially, we were going to ask the board, we shared this at the last school board meeting, and I think I provided all this to all of you to look at and review. First, if you had any questions on what we want to do or how we want to proceed and go through that. Mr. Bauer and I got a lot of information. We got a lot of community feedback. We visited all the buildings. We got more feedback from the building level administration and teachers and staff, and came up with some ideas for renovations that we thought were appropriate using that information. And I think what we shared with y'all was some different options, some different things to talk about, and that's where we are today. So would it be appropriate to start with questions first, or y'all tell me what's best?
I say go ahead and jump on in.
All right.
Let's hear it.
Let's start with Harding Avenue Elementary School. Mr. Bauer, if you want to go through what our recommendations may be.
Yep, thank you, Dr. Bregan. So we're going to talk about 5 buildings this evening, 3 elementary schools, a middle high school, and a middle school. So we're going to start with Harding Elementary School. Hopefully everybody's got a chance to visit these schools. Your maintenance and custodial staff really does do a quality job of taking care of your buildings. But as we know with all things, they start to wear out. You know, as we get older, we know some of our parts are starting to wear out. So it's the Harding Avenue. We're going to start here. This building is one of my favorite buildings, partly because I love the open school concept. So I've spent a lot of my career filling in and making them classrooms out of the open pod concept. It was a great idea in the 60s and 70s. But what we found over time is that the teachers and students want their own spaces. If you've ever been through Harding Elementary or another school that has an open plan, what you find is that they're amazingly quiet. It is the quietest school you could ever possibly imagine because everybody respects the quietness of the space next to them. And so as Dr. Bregan said, we engaged both staff along with the building principals and some parents were engaged as part of the process. And so the 26 items that you see on the screen were kind of concerns that they kind of voiced prior to us walking through the building. Everything from the security vestibule to adding a ramp to the modular classroom, installing, replacing the brown metal roof around the perimeter, started to construct walls where the classrooms are. And I'm not going to go through each item, but there was a handful of concerns that we heard. We also we did a walkthrough, both our team, the architects and the engineers, to go through the buildings to say, what else can we see as part of this? Now, what's important is this is the beginning of the process. So as we develop the capital improvements, we're going to talk about today about the capital improvements, if we did all of them, and if we also did a renovation and or addition to the building. So those are kind of 3 different paths for each of the buildings. And as we move forward with this process, we're going to ask for more engagement and say, hey, Josh, we really love the idea of Harding Elementary. Let's do this. Can we add walls in the classrooms? Oh, by the way, can we add a 5th grade pod and get rid of the modular classroom? Can we combine and have the dining room and the kitchen to be in one space? Those are all things that we're as we move forward that we're going to ask for input from the board. So again, this was the list of items that was created. The second sheet on the screen is now starting to think about how can we implement some of these pieces. So So some good news for you is that we're already in the process of doing some work in Harding Elementary School. And one of those is the security vestibule. So the security vestibule, we've already ordered the doors, the windows. They're going to be working on this piece in the evenings. And the HVAC project is already is actually pretty close to being completed on the building itself. So when we're looking at the items here for the capital improvements, there are some things that are in progress. As we're looking at the floor plans, I said one of the concerns from the teachers, from the parents, was said, well, can we in fact separate this one big open space into multiple classrooms and have quarters? One of the things that we found is as we've converted other buildings that were open plan to that, is that you do end up needing a little bit more square footage, and the teachers get a little tiny bit less space. That's one of the first things they say is, wow, great. I have a lot more privacy, I don't have to be as quiet, my students can be louder, but my classrooms may be a little bit smaller. So as we're looking at these spaces, so we don't have enough space here to be able to fit fifth grade, so that would be actually addition to the building. But what we're showing here is to keep pre-K, K where it's at, first, second, and third and fourth grade, in their current location. One other thing that you may not be aware of is that in the original design is that the kitchen and the servery are in a different location of the building than your dining room or your multi-purpose room. Were you aware of that? So the students actually will go over to the kitchen, they'll grab their food, and then they'll walk down the corridor to be able to go to the multi-purpose room, which is where their dining room is. So one thing that we may want to look at as an opportunity would be to create a dining room adjacent to the kitchen itself. Because one of the things that we're going to hear with all three of the elementary schools is there's really a desire to have a separate dining room and a separate multi-purpose room. The multi-purpose rooms were a great idea, but they're not really a great gym. They're not really a great stage format. They're also not really a great dining room. They kind of okayed everything. It's one of the things that you'll see with all three of the elementary schools is really a concern to have those as separate spaces. So what we're proposing is a possibility of keeping the kitchen where it's at, renovating it, and then creating a dining room addition, so it's a completely separate space altogether. So a couple of the requests were to renovate the administration area, and then to give some love to the multi-purpose room. So as you can see here, we're really kind of showing option one and option two. Option one is looking to address all of the concerns that the staff and the parents had, along with some additional things that we saw as far as like electrical upgrades and new lighting. And then option two, which is not an add-on. Actually, option number two would be to look at doing a comprehensive renovation of all of the building, because with the capital plan, we're not going through and renovating the whole building. What we're doing is we're selecting all of those items, and then the rest of the building doesn't really get the other pieces of love. So you can see there's about a $2 million difference or so, from doing the capital plan, all those pieces, versus doing a complete renovation. Now you may say, Josh, well, we don't want to do that. We just want to add the walls in the classrooms, or we just want to add the dining room. That's why we have these discussions, is what is appropriate for each of the buildings. So are there any questions on this building as we're kind of looking at each one of these? And I know that you have a long board meeting ahead of you, so I don't want to belabor each one of the issues unless you have any questions. Okay.
I'm going to apologize in advance because I did take a step out, so you likely answered this question already. But as a part of this redesign, is it staying an open concept, or are you adding walls and classrooms?
That's a great question. So yes, in this case, what we're showing in a line item there would be to actually add walls and be able to create separate classrooms. So pre-K all the way through fifth grade. Now pre-K through 4 can fit in your current space, but fifth grade would be a small addition to be able to make sure that we have pre-K through 5, and all of them would have separate walls and quarters like you have in the other schools. I've spent a lot of my career converting 1960s and 70s buildings from the open plan into a traditional school, with quarters and with walls. Okay. Any other questions on Harding? Yes, sir.
I have a question. So we had a demographic study done, and so I know that space has been an issue at Harding. That's why we have the modulars there. Is this adding how much space is this? So I know you're getting rid of the modular and moving them into the building, but are you increasing the capacity at all in the building, A? And how does that map on to the projections for enrollment for that building?
Great question. So if you look in the bottom left-hand corner, so what we're showing here is the current capacity at 264 students. And then the additional capacity with at least 3 additional classrooms, we create another 75 capacity for the building. So yes, we are creating capacity. It may not be what the board desires, so we may want to look at additional space. But we are adding at least 3 classrooms into the space.
Okay, sorry, on my screen, that part was cut off.
I'm sorry?
No, it's not yours. I just looked over. I have 2 screens here. So, Dr. Bregan, do you know how that corresponds to enrollment projections for the, I don't remember how far out those projections are. I'm assuming that the renovations take into account the growth or.
Correct. The projections that we had from the demographic report we have is actually slightly declining enrollment over at Margaret, sorry, I meant the wrong school. I was at Margaret Beeks, Harding Avenue Elementary School. Right now, the enrollment is around 282 students, and 10 years out, it has the enrollment there projected to be pretty stable, 296.
Okay, oh, wonderful, thank you. I have a general question, but I'll wait till after your presentation.
Okay, wonderful. Anybody else have any questions for Harding? Okay. So Gilbert Lincoln, the next 2 schools are sister schools. So they were constructed around the same time. I believe that one was open one year and then one the other year. So they're, I think, 172 and 173. But if you've been through the buildings, they have a lot of same characteristics. It's a lot of shared love between the buildings. Again, great comments. Same themes. Construct a separate gymnasium and/or cafeteria. Replace the exterior windows. Upgrade the lighting. Replace the skylights, enlarge the classrooms in the upper wing. You're going to see a handful of comments of, hey, can we make the classrooms a little bit larger? Can we upgrade the lighting, the windows, make the spaces more comfortable? So this building is very interesting because both this and Margaret Beeks have an annex. Did anybody go to Beeks or Lincoln School? Not as a student?
As a parent.
So one of the things I heard is when the annex started, it was actually like a kindergarten center is the way that it originally started, and now they've kind of become a hybrid, multi-purpose space. And some of the comments that we heard was, hey, can we convert that into a gym? Can we make that space, because it is an open plan? Can we convert it into gym? And unfortunately, the response is, though the ceiling is really low. So basically when you remove the ceiling tiles, so these tiles here, the structure is just right above that. So we don't have a lot of volume. So as we looked at it and said, what could that space be? It's not really great for classrooms because it would be kind of separate, but what if at both schools, could we convert that into a cafeteria dining room? It would actually be a wonderful cafeteria and dining room space. We could either connect it or have it separate, put the kitchen in there, and what that would do is that free up your current kitchen space to be able to make that space for your gymnasium, whether it's storage, whether it's space for a clinic, or other function. And as I said, in both buildings, we're proposing to convert the annex into a dining space. It also continues to keep that multi-purpose aspect of it. So we were there over the summer. There was a lot of program activity going on where students were eating lunch, and it was a great space. And we think there's really a great opportunity to be able to convert this into space, and then now make your multi-purpose room more gym focused, which again has that high volume space. In this one, also there was a request for a security vestibule. The classrooms were the ones that were interesting in this building because there was a request for 4 new classrooms. And the idea was to construct them at the end of the building, and then there was the request to, in the upper classrooms, which are the plan south of the building, is make those larger. So what we could do is make sure that we construct enough classrooms then to make those current classrooms a little bit larger, because they are snug. For those big people like me, I want to make sure that the classroom is large. But I said I think we have an opportunity here. There was also a request to connect the 2 wings, which really kind of takes us on a much larger perspective. So with with the small classroom addition, that would be 4 classrooms. If we actually did a connector, we'd be looking closer to 11 classrooms. So if you look in the bottom left-hand corner, now you can see if we're looking at adding capacity with the 4 classrooms and converting the existing classrooms, making them a little larger, we're looking at adding 44 students, where the larger wing would end up adding actually 154 classrooms. And I believe the enrollment here, Dr. Bregan, is also relatively flat.
It's going to stay right around 300.
So again, the folks, the staff here had really big dreams to say, hey, what if we did this and connected the wing and did a lot of classrooms? A really good fit may be those 4 additional classrooms, and converting those existing classrooms, making them a little bit larger, may be a really good fit in the upper wing. And I said, if we were to move the kitchen over into the annex, that would allow us to create a phys ed classroom. Also, there was a request to have a student shower and like laundry space. Some students may have an incident while at school, or they may not have an opportunity at home to get as pristine as we would like, as they would like to be. So is there an opportunity here for a space for a student to be able to get cleaned up? And then also creating some additional storage for phys ed, which is greatly needed. So now with this one, I said we have the option 1, which is looking at all capital improvements. Option 2, which is again that comprehensive renovation. So that would be looking at renovating the entire building. And then we broke out the additions. Option 3 is a larger classroom, so it's 9 classroom addition. And then option 4 would be 4 classrooms. So again, we're looking at 3 and 4 being being additions to the building, to kind of looking at adding capacity to the space. Okay. Are there any questions on Gilbert Linkus?
I had a question on this one.
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure how Gilbert Linkus uses their annex, but is that annex currently used as classroom space, so student capacity?
It's more multi-purpose space is what we saw. Okay. We really didn't see it quite as actual classroom space, and I could be wrong, but so what we saw was more multi-purpose, like groups of students or multiple classes being able to meet together there. It wasn't really necessarily a elementary classroom per se.
Interventions like the reading specialist and things like that.
Okay, right. Okay, so my question was kind of tied into if we didn't add option 3 or 4 to add more capacity, but we take away that annex, we don't lose capacity necessarily, right?
Not from a standard classroom standpoint.
Standard classroom, right. Okay.
I had a question as well, just about the positioning of the kitchen and the cafeteria dining, just because I'm familiar with the space. So, and when my children attended Gilbert Linkus, that was still the kindergarten access. So the change has only been within the last few years. Access to the building, if you're looking at the map, you can kind of see a little sidewalk that goes to where it says the kitchen. Like that's the closest way to get from the main part of the building into the annex. So if the further part of the building was the dining room, is there a really good way for students to enter and exit, especially if you need something that's with accessibility concerns? You're kind of like, and I know things would get moved around, but you're kind of like going through the dumpsters to get to the to the cafeteria, and that's a longer way to get in and out of the building.
And you're absolutely correct. So we really mull this over a lot. So the loading dock is actually to the left-hand side there. You can actually see where the dumpsters are. So some of our logic was, well, what if we put the kitchen, and that way the loading dock is kind of serving the kitchen and also your mechanical room and all those pieces, is one way to think about it. Another thought is that from a view standpoint, having the kitchen or the dining room on this side would give you actually better views out of the dining room. On the other side, we're thinking, well, if we put if you put the kitchen on the other side, right there, first thing is they're going to go right in and go right into the building. So this isn't a design, but there's definitely a lot of factors to this. And one of the other big factors is, do we connect the buildings? Because that was one other item that was a request is, can we in fact put a covering and have a enclosed, so students aren't necessarily going outside per se to be able to get from the building to the annex. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done with this. This is just simply kind of a space planning exercise to say, can we fit it? And the answer is yes. So the kitchen may not exactly be where we're showing it, or the dining room. It was just kind of our first thoughts. And mainly we're trying to keep the loading dock as all one home, as opposed to having kind of two different loading docks for the building. But it's a great thought.
And I just had one other thought, comment. I did, when I was able to tour some schools earlier this year, I think I remember in Auburn Middle School, they have a shower and washer dryer area that's next to the nurse's office. And just in terms of like having an adult nearby to help, I don't know if that the person in the nurse's role might be a little more available than the person in the phys ed teacher's role to help monitor students who need those facilities.
And
I know this is just like
that is
roughing
also
out
a great
space.
point. So as part of the renovation would actually be to renovate the admin area, so that would be part of the nurse, and that would be the program. So the program could either be at the gym or at the nurse, where the phys ed teacher would be the one monitoring versus the nurse. We would not envision that the students are just going in and doing their own thing, because that probably would be a bad result for all of us.
Yeah, they're a little too small for that, I think.
But yes, as if the board decides to move forward with the project, we would definitely be engaging the admin and the team a lot more to say what is the best location for this. We want to make sure we provide it, but where is that home going to be?
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand something. So the current enrollment is 312 students, and the current capacity is 440. So we have a 25% capacity available. And option 1 increases the capacity by 44. Option 2 increases it by 154. What is the reasoning for increasing capacity?
So the option 3 and 4. So option 3 would be to do the 9 classroom addition. So that would be the larger. Oh, I see. So that's confusing. So yes, on the map it's option 2, and on the spreadsheet is option 3. So sorry for the confusion on that.
Okay.
But yes, so the idea
That's
with the
3 and 4 on the left-hand side at the bottom.
Yeah, and the part of for the 4 classrooms is we would actually be slightly reducing the capacity, because as we're enlarging the classrooms that are in the upper wing, which is the one that runs between the green and the pink to the left, as we slightly increase those, we may end up actually losing 2 classrooms in that mix. So we're not really gaining, 4 classrooms, we're really gaining 2.5 classrooms as part of the logic. With the other addition would be a lot larger of an addition, and the part of that is to not only gain the classrooms but also to connect the 2 wings, if that makes sense.
So for option 1 in the gray bar with the parentheses capital improvements.
Yes.
What is the capacity for that option?
So that would stay 440. That would not change because that option is capital improvements only. So I'm sorry for confusing the map versus the spreadsheet.
And then for option 2, comprehensive renovations, what would the capacity be?
That would be the same capacity with the orange and the gray and the green. Okay, on the right hand side, those are the additions that would add capacity.
So comprehensive renovations would not increase class sizes.
Correct, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why I separated the additions. I was trying to make it more logical, and I didn't do a good job to try to separate the additions as separate options, because the board may say, hey, Josh, that doesn't make any sense. When we already have enough capacity, why would we increase capacity? So I separated those out as different options for us to talk about.
And we tried to take the information that we got from the community members. It would be really hard to justify the spending of the millions of dollars it would cost to add those additional 9 classrooms when the enrollment isn't going up and we're not at capacity yet. But we wanted to include it all and take all the feedback and share with you. So that's why Josh Bauer separated that clearly the distinct options. Right. That it's hard to say when we're at 75% capacity that we need to add 9 additional classrooms and a whole new wing.
But in that comprehensive renovation, from what I'm hearing is that we could potentially increase the classroom sizes, decrease the overall enrollment capacity, and still meet our future needs for the next decade.
Correct.
That would be correct, sir.
Yes.
So Yeah. I'm just curious as to why that scenario wasn't presented here. The decreased capacity, increased classroom sizes without additions.
We didn't look at decreasing capacity, but I hear what you're saying. That could be an option that we do if the projections call for it to be at the same, at the 300 level, and we're at 400 capacity, we could do that. That's why we're having these discussions at this point. We didn't reduce any capacity. Is that correct?
Yes, typically it's frowned upon to decrease capacity. So I did not propose that as an option, but you're absolutely right, sir. That's why we have these conversations, is saying, hey, what if we made the classrooms large? We actually decreased the number of classrooms, made them a little bit larger, per the request of the staff, and move forward with that. But that would be included in the comprehensive renovations to go through and do that, if that makes sense. So because again, we are with the comprehensive renovation, we're looking at finishes, HVAC, lighting. It's looking at more of the building holistically as opposed to focusing on just a single capital improvements.
Okay. So if we wanted to go with that, that would be ballpark costs. If we decided to decrease capacity but increase classroom sizes, it'd be in that comprehensive renovation cost.
Yes, sir. We can include that in the comprehensive, between the $16 to $19 million, that would be included in those costs.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on this one?
I think Bob had a question. Yeah?
I was just going to ask you maybe to explain the outdoor classroom thing. I see that a lot of times, and I don't know that those type things really get utilized.
So they do if the staff wants to use it. So we found a lot of success in an outdoor, and it is not a playground. So that is one thing, and it doesn't say playground anywhere near that, because an outdoor classroom is no different than a classroom versus going across the hall. What we found is that if their teachers are interested in doing it, the one thing. Do you remember when we were kids, and it got to be about April and May, and the weather got nice, and the teacher goes, okay, if everybody behaves this morning, we're gonna head out. We're gonna have class outside. Do you remember when your teachers did that? Your teachers did that, right? So weren't you like on the best behavior? And you knew that if you went outside and you misbehaved, it wasn't gonna happen again. So you were always on your best behavior. We found this, that if teachers are excited about doing that in a safe environment, because again, this is an enclosed courtyard, is that you can go out there, be outside. It's a win-win for everybody. Behave students. Teachers get to go outside. Everybody gets to enjoy the time out there. It is not an inclement, weather event, and it is not a playground. So as soon as you turn to a playground, it's distracting for everybody. It does not work. So we just opened up a brand new elementary school on Wednesday. So on Monday, and they are for the first time experiencing the outdoor classroom. And so it is for those who haven't done it, it's an experiment. We found that teachers who want to do it, it is a great thing. Otherwise, the space does not get used. So does that answer your question?
It's more of an assumption, but yeah.
Can I piggyback on that question about the outdoor classroom?
Uh-huh.
Is that also like a space that a school could create a community garden in, or a school garden in? Is that, because I think the outdoor classroom is, in some instances, isn't just a space for taking students when you want them outside, but also is kind of used as a classroom.
Correct. It's a great science space, or a space that you can kind of get dirty without having to worry about the custodians really getting upset with you. So, if you want to use a science experiments where you're tossing an egg, or you're dropping something, or you're growing a garden, it's a great opportunity to be outside in a controlled environment, do education without having to worry about making a mess, or breaking something inside of your classroom. So yes, we find that the sciences ends up, kind of out there a lot in those spaces. As a matter of fact, right now we are converting a middle school at Fredericksburg City to an elementary school, and that is one of the biggest things, is to have outdoor classroom space with a canopy in a portion of it, and doing the elevated gardens, in the back side of that, so that way it becomes a sciencey type of space.
One last question on that. Apologies if it's in here, I'm just not seeing it. Which option is that outdoor classroom a part of?
So that would be part of the nine classroom options. So that would be option 3 on the right-hand side, or it would be option 2 on the floor plan.
That makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, just another question about the outdoor classroom.
Yeah.
So the way that it's drawn here, it looks like there's a lot of classrooms that view the outdoor classroom. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So if there's one class that's participating in the outdoor classroom, then there's like 10 that are viewing kids outside while they're inside? Okay.
Yeah, so, and one of the things is that we want to make sure that you have daylight in your classroom space, is a key factor. I said when you're looking at behavior, again, the reward system really does work. I'm not just an architect, I'm not an educator, but the idea that if you are well behaved, then you can go out and do this. Any teacher and even multiple classes can be out this outdoor space. So if you know for a fact, hey, if Josh behaves today, which I was a terrible kid, but if you behave today, then in fact tomorrow we can go outside and do what this class is doing. It's an incentive to be awesome for that day, and also to say when you're out there, if you don't behave, we don't do this again. So the positive pro incentives really truly do work for the majority of students. But yes, and this is no different than if your classroom door is open and you see students walking in a corridor or in a classroom across the hallway. There are distractions in a school. You're not so isolated, and especially in Harding Elementary School. My goodness. When you talk about distraction, there's no walls in between the classrooms. So imagine having a classroom right next to you, and you hear the teacher that you had last semester, speaking. So yes, you would be able to view from the outside, from the inside out to the outside. Okay. Any other questions on this one? Okay, Margaret Beeks. Same kind of things about the same items about the gymnasium, the cafeteria. Constructing walls in the annex for better usability, whatever that means. Constructing cubbies in the primary classrooms. One of the challenges that we heard a lot in this one is that there are no doors as you go to the upper wing, or not the upper wing, but the wing that is running vertically, is that there's no actual doors between the classroom and the quarter. So again, this was wonderful ideas. So the challenge is there's no door to be able to shut. So as students are walking down or teachers are walking down having conversations, you can hear that. So they said, can you please add doors to our classrooms? And can you take the cubbies from the corridor, from the hallway, and put them in our classrooms? Because right now, as students are grabbing their stuff, everybody can hear. And while there's logic and elementaries are fantastic and they're quiet, there is a distractive element to that piece. So as they were looking at improvements, those are some big ones. They also want to have a secure vestibule. Renovate the administration area, renovate their server room, replace public address. Well, we didn't really talk about ADA upgrades. There is a request at each of the buildings to be able to do ADA upgrades, whether that's toilet rooms, whether that's countertops, doorways, to really try to do as much as we can to make these buildings more ADA friendly. In the 60s and 70s, we really didn't have those rules. So while the buildings are not negligent in any way, shape, or form, there are improvements that we could make as we're renovating to be able to make them more accessible friendly. So just like other options, so the option one is looking at the capital improvements and the comments that were addressed, the comments that were raised from staff, and also from our observations. And then option two would be to do the comprehensive renovation of the entire building. Again, same thing with the annex, is looking at the CAF and the both the dining room and the kitchen space. So this isn't, there was no request for additions, no request for additional classrooms. As you can see here, the current enrollment is about 315. Current capacity is actually a little bit higher at 528 for this building. Any questions on this building? Okay.
I do have a quick question, sorry.
Yes, sir.
Because I'm asking questions on every one, apparently. I'm just curious because having been in those schools, I know that they're very similar, but I'm surprised that the current capacity is almost 100 more in Beeks, considering those schools are so similar.
They are similar. This has 4 classrooms more, so it quickly adds up when you're looking at the overall amount of capacity. So it's not significantly larger, but when they did the addition for this building, it is a little bit larger on this. The one that runs vertically, it's just a little bit larger.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions on this one? So Montgomery Central, and I really appreciate the presentation that was given before I came up. This building serves a great purpose, and as a matter of fact, in my homeschool vision, we are in the process right now of doing a very similar renovation to the alternative school. there's such a misunderstanding that this is the school that all the bad kids go to. And yes, while that is the case where some students that misbehaved, end up in the school, but there's also a lot of students who just simply really can't handle the large classroom format or that teaching format. And I applaud everything that they're doing here because it really is a fantastic program. So the question is, what can we do to give this building some love? It's been a good building for you. And as we look at this, while structurally it is, just like the rest of your building, structurally is in good condition, as we're looking at the inside, the interior finishes, the plumbing, HVAC, there's definitely some love that this building could experience. Replacing the windows, adding parking for both staff and for visitors, demolishing the lockers in the corridor, to make it a little bit wider, there's things that could be done, as early as this coming summer. There's also some longer extension projects. Some of the things that as we're looking at the buildings, I really do applaud looking at adding cooling to the buildings. Over the years, you've added some heat pumps. So as you look down the exterior of the building, you see all the heat pumps running down each one of the classrooms. But when it was done, they ran from the heat pump and they ran the pipes along the wall, to the split unit that's there. So there's some things that as we're looking to do some upgrades with replacing finishes and replacing the ceilings and lighting upgrades, let's see what we can do to get some of the pipes above the ceiling, and also, the data. Doug is here, so I'm going to be kind about data. But it's really well run, but it'd be great to run some of those things above ceiling if we were to replace those. So as we're looking at this, we could do a lot of these projects over the summer. But as we're looking at something that's a little bit more comprehensive, maybe something that we section off a section of the building, during the school year to be able to renovate, similar to what we're doing at CHS. So with option one, looking at capital improvements, option two would be a comprehensive renovation of the entire building. Some big things that I would highly recommend is that HVAC. We are getting at the very end of the life. So if we could replace HVAC, part of that also would be to replace the electrical system, because as we look to upgrade HVAC, I don't know that the electrical capacity is going to be able to handle it. Same thing we're going to talk about at the middle school. So as we're looking to give the building some love, by doing interior finishes, let's also look at doing the systems upgrades rather than doing them out of order. So let's do the systems upgrades and then we do the finishes after that's done, rather than doing the finishes and then a couple years from now doing the systems upgrade, which you're going to have to do anyway. So any questions? And actually, I do need to upgrade my enrollment because I had it at 50, and I just heard that there were 70 students in the building, so I will need to upgrade that when I do this again. So any questions on this building?
I have just one question. I noticed that one of the requests was for more classroom space, and there is an additional classroom space in what you're proposing here, but based on enrollment alone, doesn't seem to be a need. Can you tell me a little bit more about that request?
Yes, so there was a request to put a modular classroom. I believe was a specific request, so we weren't really showing an addition. And if the modular classroom is there, that may or may not be something that the board desires. Is to actually do a modular, or do we do a small addition to the building? One thing that may be a benefit also is to look at some multi-purpose space and some gym space too with it, to allow the students to have some time to be able to burn some steam, inside of there. So, but yes, the request was for a modular classroom. I'm not showing that reflected in the plan because I've looked to hear what your thoughts are on whether you desire to have to add a modular, or if you prefer to do it as a single classroom.
Mm-hmm. And that leads to, I guess, one of the general questions I had for you. So we just have a list of asks. Mm-hmm. We don't know how many people, the priority in that list. So that's one of the reasons I asked that specific question. Are these, like, how do I know how to interpret this list, the list for all of the schools?
I don't know that that we discussed or was given into as a priority. If you would like, for the next board meeting, we can actually put that into a priority list, and re-engage everybody and say, hey, what is the most important pieces to you when you're looking at the capital plan?
I think it'd be really helpful to have a little bit more information on, just to see the input, the level of input, if one person is, I don't know, like number one in modular, was that one person, whereas like 20 or 30 people asked for something else on this list. So, because we need to be responsive to our constituents. So having a little bit more information about that feedback process is really important for us so that we can go back and we can explain, well, these are why we made these particular decisions, because the vast majority of people wanted A, B, or C.
Yeah, and we'd be happy to help to re-engage and to actually meet with them and say, hey, if you had to give a priority, let's do 1 through 10 and do that. So that we'll do that between now and the next board meeting, so we can give you. And that's part of the reason for this engagement is this is the beginning of the process, not the end of the process.
And it might be helpful to use this as the starting point for the discussion, right? So if you were going to go back to, let's say, Margaret Beeks and pull up what the proposals are and some of the things we did. Here are some of the things, here's what their estimated costs were. If we had to prioritize, what would we want? How many people want this and those things. Like we said, some people wanted that addition at Gilbert Lincoln Elementary School. We can't justify a whole wing of 9 classrooms when we're under capacity now, right? So we tried to hear all voices, but at some point we do have to whittle that down. And at Mont Central, I just know that there are some spaces that aren't fully utilized for classroom space that I think when you did some renovations, you would get that additional space without even going outside the footprint. Is that correct?
Yeah, the building is in some ways a little underutilized and could be kind of capacity could fit a little bit better. So but yeah, we'll definitely say we'll definitely re-engage with everybody, kind of get that priority list, so that way we can give you better information.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, any other questions on this one? Okay, last one, Charlottesville Middle School. So there's actually less. This probably had the least amount of comments as far as the what was the request. Paint classrooms, replace the carpet in the library, replace the HVAC system, add adult toilet rooms, add a secure vestibule. There wasn't as many requests on this building itself. The building has a lot of character. It's actually, I think, the original building plus 5 different additions. We were able to kind of ascertain, it's been kind of grown over the years as it's grown, and so so some things that we saw that may be worthy of doing outside of the requests were some exterior improvements, like the wall it's in the front of the building. That'd be great to just kind of to patch that and paint it. Doing a secure vestibule addition. So because right now they buzz you in and you're right inside of the lobby space. There is no kind of inner space to go to be able to get there. They asked for replacing of the interior finishes, replacing of the auditorium seating. And I will say another thing about the auditorium. I love your auditorium at that middle school. So because the back of the auditorium is actually your dining space. By the way, I'm going to steal that because I really love that concept. It's very unique. How can we best utilize spaces? And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Doing some ADA upgrades, would definitely be helpful in the building. I said HVAC was probably the biggest thing that we heard. Literally, is that there's a lot of squeaking and noise, and again, your staff has done a fantastic job, but stuff is starting to wear, and it may be good to look at that along with doing the electrical and some lighting upgrades in the spaces. So this one was a big jump because again, the requests were, and what we found was not, was in the 13 to 15 million dollar range, whereas doing a comprehensive renovation is getting closer to the $27 million range. We really didn't find, even as we're looking at replacing windows and other pieces of capital improvements, the justification to warrant to do a comprehensive renovation. But since I showed it for the other buildings, we thought it'd be only fair to do apples to apples, as we look at each of these pieces. So any thoughts on this building as we're looking at capacity, as we're looking at thoughts of the capital improvements?
I do know this is the oldest building, but like you said, there's a lot of uniqueness to it that I think a lot of people in the community would like to keep. And with it being said that with the request that you got in, it looked like there was community input as well as from a staff. To me, it looks like just a lot of, your normal wear and tear because of the age and things like that. So it doesn't look like, I feel like it looks like anything that's too aggressively cost worthy as to where we're kind of second guessing, should we not at this point, that they're asking for. I know it is one of the less occupied schools in the district, and so there is room for growth there, whatever it be necessary for in the future, possibly. So, and I do think what you said about the auditorium and the other was kind of cool. So I kind of like the fact that they want to keep that concept. I didn't realize that, so that's neat to know.
Yeah, well, one of my favorite memories of that is that as I was getting done around the building, it started to sprinkle a little bit. So I was like, I'm going to start to walk towards my car, and comes a young lady on a horse, walking, going down the street. So I got to high five the young lady on the horse as we were going by. It was, but yeah, I love the building. It's a fantastic building. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions on this, or any now that we've kind of gone through it, is there any questions that we have as a general process? Sounds like we're going to make a priority list as our next step. We're also going to continue to kind of develop concepts and think about where's the proper placement. Also, we'll re-show these to each one of the administrators of the buildings to say, hey, as we're looking at this, are there any additional thoughts that you had? Like, hey, please don't do the outdoor classroom. So again, we'll look to get some feedback between now and the next board meeting.
Yeah, the main question I had was kind of next steps, right? And I think we touched on that, and I know our board of supervisors is waiting on us to kind of give them a vision for this, but I think in order for us to take that next step, we kind of need a prioritized list so we can have a more detailed conversation, so.
And all options that are laid out here would include asbestos and lead abatement for whatever renovations are being done, correct?
For the capital improvements, if there is anything in that area that needs to be done, yes. For the comprehensive, it would be anything in the building itself. So like the capital improvements, if we were just doing the floor tile, we're not going to go and abate things. We're not going to abate the ceiling.
Okay, so only for the comprehensive renovations would abatement be comprehensive across the entire building?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Thank you.
Now, if you would like it to create that as a separate line item, we can certainly look at that. But then now we're tearing down ceilings and doing other things to be able to do that abatement that we didn't do in the plan. So, but yeah, in the comprehensive, because we're going to be removing everything, that the idea is that we would do any abatement very similar to what we're doing at CHS right now.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any thought, this might be more of a question for Dr. Bragan than for you, Josh, I apologize. Is there any thought to expanding pre-K programs into Harding and Gilbert Lincoln? That would be part of these renovations, or just, I believe it's part of the plan, isn't it? Isn't expanding pre-K?
We definitely want to expand our preschool programs, and we expanded some this year. We want to continue to expand and get that preschool expansion aid. We'll look specifically at those schools. We didn't look specifically there because there are some other areas of the county that are, daycare deserts where they don't really have access to preschool unless we provide it by the school. But we could definitely look at those schools too for what that would look like. The state gives us these numbers for preschool expansion projections and what we should and shouldn't do, because they will then fund it. So we'll take a look at those. Yeah, that's something we should definitely add, and we'll see. Let me find out from our preschool expansion aid monies where those targeted funds are for which grade level, for which age levels, 3 and 4 year olds, and if we could do that up in that area for those schools, we'll definitely see how that fits into the additions.
Thank you.
Board, any other questions, comments?
I have a question about the next steps as well, in addition to what I already asked. So in the next iteration, I know this is the initial draft, is the plan to move from one building to another and start with one building? Is it to be, for these capital improvements, are we going to do, say, HVAC in 4 schools, 5 schools, and go through particular elements of this? What's again, I guess the question is the priority here, because this is everything, and we're mainly deciding between the different options, but some of the kind of macro level questions about the next steps, I'm wondering.
Right.
I can answer that question, Josh, if that's okay.
Yep.
My thought would be that would really depend on what the final iteration is, Dr. Guthrie, and what's the funding source, right? So we did the 3 elementary schools right before as I was arriving in the district, and we had a pot of money that we used, and we did those all simultaneously, and they all got finished about the same time. I would love to be able to do something like that if we decide we're going to move this project forward with these 5 schools, that somehow we get a funding source where we can do it all at the same time. Because otherwise, and I don't know that that's possible. That's beyond, my pay grade to decide what funding we have and what access we have. Because otherwise, then this board is going to triage who comes first. And then we got to go through that process on, what's the next school, the next school, the next school. And, 4 school boards and 3 superintendents later, maybe it gets done, right? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be great to be able to do it all at once, but if not, I think providing some of the rationale to us for some of those decisions, in addition just to getting the plans and the numbers and projections.
Where the greatest need would be, right? Where would we need to triage first, I think is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sorry, Josh, did you want to add to that?
No, you did a great job.
So just foreshadowing a little bit, it looks like all of the comprehensive renovations for the most part are a small bump increase. So if we were wanting to take care of abatement across the board, for most of the schools, it would not be a significant increase, except for Shawsville, where it is a very significant increase. It would be interesting to have a option 1 with comprehensive abatement line item in there to understand the cost of getting lead and asbestos abatement in all of these schools as we're doing renovations associated with them.
Yeah, and we can put that together. So what we would look at is the demo and the abatement, and then also the replacement of the finishes. So what I'll do is I'll create a separate number at Shawsville for that piece by itself. I said with the other buildings, we're doing a lot more. There was a lot more requests and a lot more need. So at Shawsville, we didn't hear that and didn't quite see that. So, but yeah, we'll create a separate comprehensive abatement number that includes the finishes. Because when we tear something out, we want to get to the pipe insulation. We need to tear out the ceiling, so we need to put the ceiling back. So that makes the question of domino effect. So if we're going to replace the ceiling, do we go ahead and do the lighting too? Because otherwise, you're going to have to. So those are things that we'll talk about. Is we'll do an abatement number, and then we'll talk about what other pieces do we want to add on. If we're already going to be doing this, do we do other pieces?
Right.
And on Shawsville Middle, Josh, the significant increase for the comprehensive plan, I mean, that's a lot more than it would be for the other schools. Is that because of the age and the materials and what you may or may not find?
It is, but it's also the less change in spaces. So at Shawsville, we weren't really changing spaces. It was more redressing HVAC and a security vestibule. They weren't asking to move 6th grade or to create additional classrooms. They weren't making major request changes as far as space goes. That's why there's not as, the other ones we're doing other big space changes, or other renovations that would include
Be higher
more for
initially. Okay.
right, for the capital improvements. Whereas Shawsville was like, hey, we don't have a lot of stuff. So that's why the number is a lot less than the full comprehensive, because we're not touching a lot of the building with the capital improvements.
Okay.
And then, this is for the administration, the current capacity, or our projected capacities.
Pretty similar throughout. It's around 200, not capacity, enrollment is about 200 right now, and it's pretty consistent for the next 10 years.
Right. It would be of interest, not just for Gilbert and Lincas, but for all schools across the county, for elementary schools. What is the projected capacity, or what is the projected enrollment for pre-K, or for the schools if we have comprehensive pre-K across our county?
We would definitely have the space for that. The question is the funding.
Right.
Okay. We'll get that.
Thank you.
Okay, board, anything else?
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all. Have a great night.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, nope, I did that. Next up, the administration would like to request a capital project transfer from the Board of Supervisors. Angie Bland, the Director of Finance, is available for questions if needed. Dr. Bregan, do you want to say anything about what's in that?
Ongoing capital projects that we have to request the appropriation when we do capital projects from the Board of Supervisors. You can see they're listed right there. If you have any questions about it, just let me know.
Okay. Do I have a motion to authorize request to the Board of Supervisors for a capital project transfer of $252,211 to the 2024-25 school operating budget?
So moved. Second?
Ms. Parton and Ms. Purcell? Any discussion?
I have just one really quick one. It goes along with the resurfacing. I heard some feedback that that there were questions about the timing of that. Can you explain the decision? And I'm not critiquing the administration for the timing of that decision, but I'd like to give an opportunity for the administration to explain the timing of that, of the resurfacing.
Yeah, so you don't think like the day before we start school was a good idea? No. That was not up to us, and we were working with an outside contractor that chose some timelines and did some things over the weekend and we weren't even aware of. So we're working on that. That was not planned and it wasn't what we had anticipated nor what we scheduled with the principals. And it wasn't just on that side of the county, it was down in Auburn as well. When the middle school principal gets a call on Sunday night that, hey, we can't park here on Monday morning because they just resurfaced the entire lot. So there was some issues there with the contractor that Dante Harris and his team are working on. Yeah,
Okay.
It was not what we wanted. They were going to do the Blacksburg High School, rip up the parking lot the Monday of the opening for the county.
And do all your principals know this and can inform their staff if there are questions about the timing, that it wasn't facilities' decision to do it at this time?
It definitely was not. And, one of the things that I've spoken to all the principals about, if somebody shows up at your building and says, hey, guess what, we're here to do whatever, and they don't have prior knowledge or that wasn't something they support, to call us directly and to tell them to turn around. I don't fault contractors. When they get the contract, they want to get in, get out, and do it as quickly as they can. And we're learning that even at the CHS renovation. But, we run a school, so we have to manage what goes on and what doesn't go on. And they have full authority, all of our principals, to say no to anybody. It's tough when it's on, Sunday and no one's there, though.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
Ms. Osborne, please call the roll.
Ms. Bond? Yes. Ms. Franklin? Oh, she's not here. Dr. Gitchery?
Yes.
Ms. Parton?
Yes.
Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
6 in favor.
Motion carries. Next up, the administration shares a draft revision of the MCPS wellness policy. Current policy was written in 2006 and last revised in 2017. Policy is presented tonight as a first read. Jason Garrettson, our Director of Student Services and Safety, is available for questions if needed. The one thing that that jumped out to me, unless I'm looking at the wrong one, I didn't see any like red line changes to know what actually changed in this thing. Or did I miss that, or is this whole thing new?
Mr. Garrison, if you want to elaborate on that.
The whole policy is essentially a rewrite. That's why you don't see the red edits. It's basically brand new, start to finish.
It'd all be red, right?
Yes, sir.
I have a question.
I'm sorry.
Go first.
You're not getting off that easy.
Sorry, Chase. Just a few. So are the vending machines still going to be available to the staff areas with this policy?
They could be, yes, ma'am. Like
That was
during
just-
the school day,
Yeah.
in the staff areas
The
for staff
areas.
only. Yes, ma'am, they should
Okay.
be.
Okay, that was a question because I didn't really know if the clarification was in there or not. And my other thing was, is this policy going to affect, I know it's got the logo stuff in there, is that going to apply to concessions at athletic events? So like if we're provided cups that say Coke or Pepsi on it, does that mean that we are no longer allowed to use things that would be given to us to use so we wouldn't have to purchase them? Or would this still allow for us to be able to use things of that nature at the athletic events?
Right. Michelle Knotts was part of our team. And while I'm up here, I need to at least take the opportunity to thank the School Health Advisory Board. They played a huge role in this policy. Great example, in my opinion, of kind of community expert, community member, school folks kind of dialogue back and forth. Michelle Knotts did not think that would be an issue. That's one we talked about specifically. There were also some questions in our conversation around smart snacks and smart snacks at concession stands. She did not see that as an issue for her in terms of her federal school nutrition programs requirements.
Okay. And then I think in the past, schools have been able to have vending machines for students. I don't know because I know our policy has kind of changed because we're outsourcing our lunches and our meals now. But the machines can be put on timers, and they can only be supplied with like certain items, like healthy items possibly. Is that going to be a possibility, or do we know anything about that?
The majority of those machines are gone.
Okay, I thought they were.
We did the triennial this past summer, where there was a question on there about our schools having to answer that they don't have any non-competitive food items during the school day, such as snack machines. Their answer choices were yes, no, and we don't have any vending machines. Most of our schools indicated we don't even have the vending machines anymore.
Okay.
If they do, for students, they must be set on a timer.
Yes.
And they still must meet some requirements as to what
what's
can be
in
served in the machine.
Yes, and
Yes, ma'am.
that was my question for that. Okay, perfect.
Correct.
Thank you.
I'd like to also thank you and the committee. I know I can just tell reading through this that a lot of thought went into this, and I like how it takes a more holistic approach. The one suggestion that I would have is, I know that there's farm to table emphasis, and nutrition is to have plant-based proteins integrated as well, and not just Impossible Burger, but that hits different populations, whether it's for religious reasons, whether it's preference, whether it's for health. I would suggest incorporating that into the plan as well as as an option. I don't want to say an option, but an awareness that would be beneficial for, I don't know how many numbers of students, but certainly a population.
I want to make sure I have that
You want
correctly.
specific? Well, there is when I'm looking at the school meals, so that's, what page is that? There's not a page number. It
Starts on page 2. Yes, sir.
And this is just my suggestion, is my recommendation. So meals featuring minimally processed and scratch cooked foods from local sources, et cetera. In that paragraph, I would suggest to the committee adding in that as another option.
Farm to table initiatives. Did I get that correct?
Yeah, and there are other reasons for some people as political. I mean, I don't want to I don't want to parse that, but I just think that there are nutritionists and there are, for religious reasons, there are students who probably would like that, and families that would like to have that as an option.
Yes, sir. I do think there are some other components of the plan that speak about school gardens and opportunities to explore those types of avenues.
Yeah,
in the
it's
community.
in there. I mean, it's not hard to add it, but I think some people would look for that.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Ms. Bond?
I don't want to sound like negative Nancy, but so to speak, when we did this in 2006, we thought this was going to be great, and it turned out to be disastrous. I don't want this to happen again. Students just didn't eat and went out and they ate McDonald's afterward. Parents didn't like it, kids didn't like it, nobody was buying lunches. I think we've got to be careful because it's not, we can't tread on, and I'm all about childhood obesity and being careful, but I think history proves that we were, how do I say this? You look back on pictures and we didn't have as much of a weight problem in America when we didn't have a lot of different types of, what word am I looking for, restrictions because of activity level. And even at our VSBA conferences, I took many sessions on this and walked away with the same thing as what I'm saying. Because, you know, it sounds good to have milk and love milk, love it great. Want healthy kids. I don't want to sound like I don't. I just think we need to be really, really careful how we go about this because it can be a deterrent more than it can be a great thing. So when it says meals feature minimal scratched foods and 0 grams of trans fat per serving and all that, that's how we got where we were. And lunches became terrible. And nobody ate them. Nobody wanted them. So this is not, I hope this is a guideline and not a restriction. Is that what we're looking at, is more of a guideline? I mean, and especially since we just went with a new provider, is that something that they're willing to?
Yes, ma'am. I can speak to that. I think you're right. When the first policy was written a number of years ago, I was building level administrator. It was very difficult. I think the team that wrote the policy back then did the absolute best they could with the information they had. Most of the material coming from this policy, as much as I like to claim that our team wrote a lot of it, we have a really nice template from VDOE right now that's just a couple years old. Again, working primarily on the nutrition components with Ms. Knotts, we're already meeting most of these guidelines already because we have to be able to participate in the National Meals Program. And then when you get into, and again, I heard someone mention page numbers, that might be a good suggestion for us to consider. When you pick up on page 5, where it begins to talk about physical education, physical activity, our team, like where it begins to list some of those, the template basically said your division can choose a few of these. And our team said, we really want to keep it wide open without boxing schools in. So you get that statement that says the following represents a broad list of goals, and each school site has some autonomy to select the goals that work for their community with input from their teams. So it really is going to be a situation where our schools are able to look at some of those goals that are good guidelines, good expectation, good frame of reference, without the expectation that we're going to be perfect, but to say, hey, this is something our school really wants to work on, and then down the road, 3 years from now, when we write the triennial, to be able to say, how do we do on that goal? And again, not a slap on the hand if we didn't meet our goal 100%, but just keeping these kind of like a mentality in front of people to say, these are things for you to consider for your school community. I think we're in a better place. I think we had better guidance from VDOE this time around.
It did seem, reading it, that it was more like guidance opposed to what we saw years ago. And I was fully on board with what we had years ago. I truly was excited about it. And it went south really bad. And I just want to make sure that this is a guidance type measure more than a have to do.
That's my intention, and I think school level leaders would appreciate hearing that from the board as well, that these are goals and not demands or specific expectations. I would also point out on the very last page, Appendix B, that is all Montgomery County on that one, where we talked about, again, trying to offer a resource, a reference page on our website, where we would just load it up with lots of different wellness articles, wellness ideas, things involving all the various topics that address wellness, again, for schools, for families, for students to be able to go say, hey, I'd like to know more about whatever topic. Let's go pick that up and see where that is, without kind of putting it in the policy as a you must do this kind of thing.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Purcell?
I don't have any questions right now.
Dr. Entry?
Nothing specific to this policy, just that I would like to see us eventually expand free lunch for all of our students free lunch and breakfast for all of our students to the entire population of our students, not just those Title I schools, but that's a state legislative issue, most likely.
Okay, great. Board, anything else? Thank you, Ms. Garrison.
Thank you. Again, I'd like to thank our School Health Advisory Board.
Of course. All right, Board, are there any items of unfinished business? Are there any items of new business?
Well, yes, there is. Okay, I would like to see if there's a consensus for having a discussion on our meetings. Although I feel we have discussed this multiple times, we seem to keep moving back into our, frankly, late meetings and trending in areas that we really shouldn't. Last meeting, it was 12:45, and I kind of spoke up and kind of said, hey, I've got to go home. And it's, we put a caveat in our 11:30, but we put those stoppers in place. And as a board member, I don't probably think that I would want to vote no when we're just in discussion. I don't think anybody else would either. So it's kind of a hard, and I understand we do important discussions, but if they're that important, I don't know that 1 o'clock in the morning is when we need to be discussing them. That's not fair to our staff. It's not fair to us. It's not fair to whatever topic that we're discussing. And I understand if it is a vote that needs to be done the next day. I understand if it's a decision that has to be made. But I personally, instead of just a check base for us at 11:30, I would like to see it as a policy. Unless it's a decision that has to be made the next day, the meeting cannot go past 11:30. It needs to reconvene. After 12 o'clock, all I was thinking was, I want to go home. I need to go home because I've got to be up at 6 in the morning and working. And I know there were other staff members, and the next board member, maybe a heavy equipment operator, could be someone who's running the machinery. And is that a safety? We need to start thinking about things like that. And we keep falling back into our bad habits. And so I would like, whether it's on a retreat, whether it's in a discussion at the board, whatever we decide to do, but I personally would like to see that either on an agenda or at a retreat to decide, some things about our meetings. And I think that we're just also getting into, and as I said before, some of the weeds of what is not our responsibility. And I had a community member actually say, Jamie, watching the meetings have gotten just hard for the community because they've gotten so long and drawn out. And I think it's because we're getting into areas that we really, it's not our position. We have staff to tend to some of the things that we're treading in. Just my thoughts, just my opinions.
Well, the one thing I'll definitely add to that, we started doing some early planning on trying to have a second retreat. Back when we were planning our first retreat, we were kind of weighing whether we wanted to have more of like a board get to know you kind of exercise, right? Which is what we went with the whole Myers-Briggs stuff. But then the other option was to actually have the SBA kind of come talk to us about roles and responsibilities, particularly for the new board members, but as a refresher for all of us. So I think that Tosh has already started having conversations with them to try to see what that might look like. we need to figure out dates, availability, all that kind of stuff. But we wanted to understand what was available to us. So I definitely think that conversation would be helpful and could probably help speak to some of that stuff and give board members an opportunity to kind of ask questions and help figure out, what roles and responsibilities should be, right? So hopefully we can all kind of get on that. But I mean, I do think that, certainly as a person who helps with agenda prep, right? I struggle with that a lot, because I know there's a lot of stuff that people want to talk about, right? Every person up here has asked to put something on the agenda recently. And I'm trying to be responsive to that. We only got so many meetings, so, right. So what do you do, right? Do we have more meetings with smaller agendas, or do we, the meetings are what they are, right? So, I know you and I have talked about that, right? Trying to find that balance. A lot of stuff is urgent, or at least to some of us. And then the administration has actually urgent stuff because they've got policies that need deciding or budgetary input. So it's a tough balance. It really is.
It is, and I do think we have to be careful, and all of us are guilty of wanting to put our passions a little bit in front of what our duty might be. And so I think those are where it helps to be, kind of have some guidance on saying, okay, reel it back in.
So I do think a board retreat would be a great opportunity for us. We've all been working together for 8 months now, right? It's another good opportunity to kind of sit down and say, hey, here's what's working, here's maybe what could be improved, and work that out together. Point taken.
I agree on the long meetings, but if you look at the agenda, there have been a lot of things on our agenda. There was one where, I don't know how many presentations, I don't know, it was 10 or what, it was a lot. If you compare it, I remember seeing one of the Board of Supervisors meeting, they're only talking about one thing. And so when we're presented with a lot of items to discuss, we have a responsibility to our constituents and to employees to thoughtfully engage. And while I think I understand what you're saying about passion, I don't know if there's a subtext there, but I feel a responsibility to the community when we're tasked with to have conversations, to take them seriously and to engage thoughtfully. I don't know if there's a critique of some of the conversation there, but that's been my approach.
I don't think I disagree with that any. I think I wouldn't have been on the board as long as I have if I did. So, I hear you and I agree with you 100%. But I do think we all can go around and go around and go around and go around and go around, especially in sometimes closed session. And even though we had a long meeting, it got tremendously longer in closed session. And again, my whole point is, if it gets to that point, then we need to reconvene at 11:30. It's not the fact that it's not important. Then we need to say, okay, when is the next time we can meet to reconvene? Because I'm sure you guys were the same with me. Time I got home, you get calmed down. It was 2:00. And then I was up at 6. Well, that's not conducive to anybody.
I was up at 6 too. I don't disagree with you
and,
on that
and
point.
our staff, that's not productive to them as well. So I just think we need to take a look at that.
And we will, absolutely. Are any other items of new business?
Yeah, so it was brought up today, but I think we should look at going ahead and implementing a policy for 7-5.2 for opioid training and Narcan use on campuses.
Yeah, I took that note as well. Is that, I guess, is that something where you would need a board consensus of to move forward on that, Dr. Bragan? Is that typically how we would approach that?
Typically. So if there's a consensus, we'll look into it. We'll bring something back to y'all and we'll talk about it.
Can I get a show of hands or a thumbs up on? Any other
So
comments on that?
I'm all about that, don't get me wrong, because I mean, my main goal has been safety from the beginning, and I'm the one that's been screaming the vaping, the opioids, the fentanyl. I do know, and the only reason I know this is because I do know medical professionals and I do know law enforcement. So my only concern is we need to make sure that we know the entire issues with the Narcan, and it is over the counter, but you've got to be careful and you've got to know how to use it. And I know there is training for that. And we need to think about liability for that as well. Because if we've got students using it on students, and what if something bad happens? We need to really talk about that. I'm not saying I'm against it, but we have a lot of things surrounding that we need to think about as well. I just wanted to bring that fact up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just for clarity, the 7-5.2 is staff utilization of Narcan. It doesn't, I don't think it speaks of student utilization of it.
I was just kind of,
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
wanted
I
to.
got where you're going.
Yeah,
but
yeah, and I'm all about the staff being trained and know how to use it and know where it's at, and yeah, we definitely need to have it. My concern is with students just going and getting it and then just thinking, well, I'm just going to use it on this person, or I can use it and it's not going to hurt me if I use it if I don't need it. You know,
there's some conversations.
there's
still
some
being had there.
conversations there, yes.
I would love to see the administration, Superintendent Reagan, come to the board with a plan, a process for how to develop that, rather than the board saying, okay, we want a policy, and couple months down the road, here's your policy. I would love to, I think, because a number of board members feel strongly about this, to be a little bit more involved in the process. So it would be great to see an actual process for how this policy will be developed.
We can do that.
Okay, board, any other items, new business? Any announcements?
I have a quick one. Mr. Chilcote came and spoke to us tonight, and he mentioned the arts, and I just can't help but give a shout out with speaking about the arts and just what great things, even with not getting all the funding that Montgomery County Schools are doing. One of our Christiansburg High School graduates is the assistant director for Sight and Sound Theater in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, on the production Daniel. And it is huge, and I'm just so proud of him for what he's accomplished. And I just couldn't help but give a shout out to him, just kind of talking about the arts that we have here in Montgomery County.
So to piggyback on Ms. Bond, I do want to thank Mr. Chilcote for coming and bringing that to our attention. We've had several board members in the past that have been passionate about the arts and the music, and I will say, COVID and several other things, money, has gotten in the way of that. That is as important, I feel like, as all of our other subjects, because I can relate to the fact that music and the arts do tie in with learning in every other subject, and Mr. Chilcote is right. It is proven that music helps the brain with every subject in school. So I have to agree with that. I'd like to have that looked into. I'd like to see how we can go ahead and start trying to work that back into our program. But I also agree with the PE, and we need to get our kids moving. So we're doing good with taking the cell phones away. Now it's time to get them up and moving and see what we can do with our PE as well, and try to get them to start getting more involved in sports. I mean, we just had Auburn High School who didn't have a varsity football team because the interest, and so the activity level, it's sad because that community, it's not fair to those kids at that school because the interest isn't there. We need to find a way to get the interest in physical activity back. It's not only good for health benefits, but it's good for your mental health as well and for stress. So I think we seriously need to look into that. And I'm going to give a shout out to my Shawsville Middle School because they had, I know it's the first week of school, but those kids had an attendance record of overall 97.02% the first week of school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. 7th grade being the most, with, I do believe, the 97, but overall with 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, 95%. Attendance has been an issue we've had forever here recently. COVID made it worse. So my kudos to them. I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it. And I'm so proud of you. And I wanted to congratulate them publicly on having such a great attendance record. So I hope they can continue that.
I will echo the support for music education in this county. We need to do more. The second thing, and the only other thing I would add, is I've heard great things about the cell phone policy. So kudos to all the teachers and staff who are helping to enforce that policy. What I've heard is that the schools are louder, students are talking to one another, and I'll just say I have not gotten one email from a constituent, parent, student, anyone objecting to the policy. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens over the course of the school year. But thanks to all my fellow board members and to the administration for making that happen. And we didn't have to wait for the state to tell us to do it. So thank you, everyone. What's that?
I'd just like to thank all the volunteers with Be Smart during the orientations at schools this year, handing out information for gun security and locks in order to secure guns at the home, to keep those guns out of our children's hands without adult supervision. That's it.
Ms. Priscilla, anything to add?
I'll try and keep the meeting short.
Well, I had some things I wanted to share, but a lot of great announcements kind of touched on all that there. I guess I would say that I did mention this during consent, but I do want to say thank you to the two organizations who donated, MCPS, the Association of Perioperative Nurses, made a donation to us, and also First Bank and Trust, which was outstanding. So thank you so much. I feel like there's a new TikTok trend out there to donate to MCPS, and I'm here for it. And let's keep that going. All right. Agenda prep is available for upcoming meetings. And see, our next one will be September 3rd. That'll be our regular session right back here. All right, next up, do I have a motion to enter into closed session as authorized by Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia to discuss 2 student matters and 3 personnel matters?
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Guthrie, Ms. Purcell, any discussion? Dr. Boone, please call the roll.
Ms. Bond? Dr. Guthrie?
Yes.
Ms. Parton? Yes. Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
6 in favor.
Motion carries. In closed session. Thanks for coming out, everybody.